Is it a bit quicker than a 1.6 GTE, mate?
It's a bit quicker.
Alright guys, and welcome back. Right, the Nova's here, ready for this engine. Well, I say ready, it needs quite a lot of work first. So anyway, here's the car. What do you think?
So this is a Nova GTE minus the engine and gearbox, and in today's video we're going to make it a 300 horsepower monster.
So the first thing I need to do to this is to strip it and check for rust, because we want to stitch weld the engine bay, make it nice and strong. There's a few bits like this, which I'm not happy about. So there's a few bits that's going to need cutting out, cleaning up and making right. So we'll start by stripping it off.
So we start with the face of the car, and that's the grille.
I have no idea what that is, but it's a horrendous bodge. We need to sort that out. One GTE grille. I removed the wiring from the stand panel as well as some of the radiator cowling clips. I disconnect the headlight loom. Most of the plugs on the car have a locking tab that is simply prise back and then pull the plug off. Once the loom is fully removed, I unbolt the two 8mm anchor screws and carefully slide out the headlight. I can then repeat the process on either side. I put all the screws back in holes just to keep everything organised. The coolant header tank has one 10mm acne screw fastening, and then there's a securing tab. The tank just slides out of that and out it comes. The ignition cord sits below this and is secured on with two 10mm acne screws. I lift out the screen wash tank and pull off the pump plugs. The hoses just slide off with a bit of force. There's an engine earth located on the near side chassis leg. I don't tend to use these as they're known to rot out. They're held on with one M8 13mm bolt. So that's the near side chassis leg pretty much stripped. Now onto the bulkhead. I start by removing the seal. I then unscrew the 3x Phillips screws retaining the wiper motor. The linkage is connected at the back via a ball joint, and this simply just prizes off. I then unbolt the remaining battery cables and pull the rest of the wiring loom through the bulkhead. Once that's out of the way, I remove the battery and the plastic tray that sits underneath it. And finally the heater blower loom, which just unplugged behind the firewall. That's that part done. I then move back to the stand panel and remove the bonnet cable held in with one Phillips screw and prise the bonnet latch mechanism out. I take the bonnet stay off. This one's in really bad condition. Most of the retaining clips are missing. It's held in with a couple of screws. This will need replacing at some point. The stay mount is rubber and just slides out the stand panel. I would advise you to be careful with these because they can split really easily. It's now time to lift the car up in the air and make it safe from axle stands. Right, so jack the car up, it's on stands. I'm going to take the wheels off, suspension, front bumper, wings, and just go from there, I think.
I filmed all of this series a couple of years ago, and I'm now finally re-editing it to make it one good video. So some of the filming is a bit old, some of the editing is not the best, but I hope you guys enjoy it regardless.
So the brakes, calipers are held on with some 10mm Allen keys, generally quite easy to get off. Unbolt a lot at once, including the hangers. Just prise it off. The disc is just one Phillips. It's only a retaining screw, doesn't really do a great deal. And that is the disc off. That's the bottom pinch bolt out the lower arms. Beautiful.
It's two 12mm bolts with 90mm heads holding the strut to the hub carrier.
And that is the hub off. So this is obviously for a 1.6 Nova. The splines in there do not fit a 2-litre drive shaft. So we're going to upgrade this to 2-litre hubs.
And to finish this side off, I remove the strut, tie rod and the lower arm.
So front suspension is completely off. That's the struts, the tie rods, the bottom arms, the hubs, the lot. So that's all stripped now. It has alerted me to a little problem I found, but I'm sure there'll be a few more of these before we finish with this project. So I'm going to show you exactly what I found now. And there she is. Bottom of the near side splash guard's rotted out. Now this is like the jacking point here. Outrigger. And it's really solid. And to be fair, it's solid there and it's solid, or fairly solid there. So it's going to be really simple because the spot welds are here for the inside. We can just cut this bit out, weld a new piece in, nice simple repair, X-prime it, and that'll go again for another 30 years. Right, so it's now time to take the front bumper off and then I can start getting the wings off. So to unbolt these, you've got one 10mm headed 6mm bolt here, well it might be an acne bolt actually. and you've got a couple, so when I say here I mean behind here, I think you've got a couple of 8mm, 13mm headed bolts which go into the chassis leg just here. That's the Acme bolt, so it's like a self-tapper with a 10mm head. Now it's just exactly the same on the other side, nice and simple. Right, now the bumper's off, I can take the wings off. Now I've got to take the side skirts off of this. They should be on clips, but these have been glued on previously looking at them. I'm just going to carefully pull them back, like that. And there's screws in the bottom, so I need to undo them. Luckily for me, the screws were in good condition and they came out really easily. If you just prise this side skirt back, you can just see one of the bolts is here holding this on. Again, it's a 10mm headed Acme screw, self-tapper type thing. There's a couple of screws here, one here and one here. And then there's the standard screws across here. And finally, there's a couple of screws behind here, so you've got to take the shelf out. So there's a screw here, screw in the middle, screw the other end, and then this kick panel off, take that out, and then you can get to the two screws. A little bit annoying, but such is life. And annoyingly, you've also got to take this off, which I forgot about, because mine doesn't have one. One screw, and it should just pull forward, like that. And that just comes out like that. And that is the screw. And the wiring for the side repeater is here. So you unplug that, and then the earth is screwed onto the body, as you can see. And we're off. As you can see, that's been welded before, not the best. I might be able to tidy that up a little bit though. Then on to the other side, exactly the same process. I just didn't film much of it. Right guys, as you can see, this is all stripped now, so I can start assessing the bodywork and see exactly what it needs and what it doesn't need. There's a few bits here and there in the wings which aren't very good, a bit scabby. A little bit scabby around the headlights, and obviously the lower splash guards and bits like that are all a little bit scabby. I need a bit of welding here and there, but nothing too serious, nothing I'm overly concerned about. So yeah, we should be able to make this a really nice strong shell. So where are we going to start? Well, we're going to start somewhere quite simple. Common area on a Vauxhall Nova. This is the outrigger from the chassis, so you kind of jack them on this and lift them on this. This lower splash guard here rots out, and as you can see, this is no exception. It's already rotted, so I'm going to cut this out and repair this first. So I've already wire wheeled the underseal off, as you can see here. That's the original X primer. So now I'm going to mark it and cut it, and we'll go from there. Now, from experience, I found it's a lot easier to use a straight edge for stuff like this. Just makes a better finish overall. It's a lot easier to put it all up and repair it nicely. Now I'm making this nice and square just to make it a little bit easier to repair. I then cut out the old panel with the 1mm cutting disc on a 4.5-inch grinder. Right, so as you can see, this is all cleaned up now. I used a flat disc, I used a grinding disc, I used a rotary file like this, and some sandpaper basically, and a wire wheel on a drill. I've got all the rust out, and I've etch primed all the inside. So once I've cut the plate out, I'll drill through with a spot weld drill onto these bits here, and then it'll just take the paint off the bit I'm going to weld rather than grinding it all off, because you can't weld through this stuff. In an ideal world, we would get the shell dipped afterwards, and then you can kind of like seal it with a dipping process like this stuff. It's like the original stuff, but it's not an ideal world, so this is the best we can do. Right, this is the bit I removed. As you can see, a little bit worse for wear. So I'm going to use this as a template, stencil essentially, to make a new one, minus the hole. Right, so I've just very crudely cut this out, and he's dressing now, so I'll do that with a rotary file. This is actually a bit of genuine Nova shell, believe it or not. So it's exactly the right thickness. I've got some metal coming, but this is all I've got at the minute. So these little belt sanders are absolutely great for jobs like this, but the only downside to them is the belts don't last 5 minutes.
So if you do want to invest in one, make sure you buy plenty of belts.
Right, so the fit overall isn't bad, but there's a slight angle here. So it just needs bending the bottom edge, basically.
I use a hammer and dolly to manipulate the metal, and this works a treat. You just need to take your time.
There's something just like that. Right, so the paint's gone off, as you can see. Just X primer. I've drilled all the holes. So I should be able to now weld this into place, plug weld these holes. It should be very strong again.
So the best thing to do with this kind of thin sheet metal work is to try and keep it as cool as possible. So just do little tacks, little stages, go over it with the belt sander, clean it up as you're going along, and just keep tacking until you're happy.
Right, welded across the top. Some of the bits were a bit crap to weld, if I'm going to be completely honest. But yeah, we've got good penetration across here. I've had to grind some of it down to weld it back, but yeah, really happy with that. So I just need to clamp this up now and then plug weld these bits. So I'm just going to use these cheap eBay special clamps. They work well. And slowly stretch the metal into place. Then I'm going to use the spot weld drill, which as you can see is a flat drill, to clean these out.
And then once I'm happy with that, I can start plug welding it all. So plug weld is there basically to simulate a spot weld, which I can't do because I don't have a spot welder.
So there we go, guys. It's all welded, it's dressed up, cleaned up, I've sanded it down. Once that's painted, you're not going to know that's been repaired. That's a really nice repair, so I'm dead chuffed for that. Right, guys, now the bottom half's all done. I'm going to use this antique Black & Decker grinder with a knotted wire wheel to remove the rest of the underseal and see if it needs any more repairs.
Now, if you've ever done anything like this before, you'll know it is probably one of the worst jobs in a restoration.
Wow, that's got some power, that. I think I'm going to wear some arm protection just in case. Right, where was I?
And if you haven't done this before, I probably wouldn't advise it, but if you must do it, please wear a full face visor, not just thin goggles, because trust me, you don't want this stuff getting impregnated in your face.
Right, guys, as you can see, we've got this horrible rubbery stuff everywhere, but we've got the bulk of it off. Now, it's revealed a couple of things I'm not happy with, if I'm honest. So most of this area looks really good. However, here, there's a hole in the strong part of the chassis leg. Doesn't look a bad thing to repair. I'm just going to cut it out, basically, put a bit of 2mm plate there, because this is a lot thicker, this stuff. Spot weld it back in. That should be okay. Here, now that's more of a concern. So you've got to remember this car is going to be 300 horsepower. So when I cut all this stuff out, I'm going to clean it up nicely, and then I'll probably replace it with 2mm plate, just to make it that bit stronger, because they can crack across here just from the the power, and we don't want that to happen. So that's going to be reinforced. This is going to be repaired properly, and so is this, because I want this car to be as perfect as I can make it. Right, I think I'm going to cut this bit out and then go from there.
Again, I'm using my trusty 4.5-inch grinder with a 1mm cutting disc.
The beauty of Vauxhalls is they don't tend to spread rust like some cars. Like some cars, from experience, will have a bit of rust everywhere. As you can see, this stuff's like brand new. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to the end of this and then cut it off, because I don't think I need to replace the whole thing. And there we go. So I need to recreate this. Weld a piece in there. Again, I'm going to use 2mm plate because it's nice and thick, this stuff. And then I'll make another piece what goes over the top so it looks factory. There we go. I need to make something like that out of steel.
Translate the cardboard template to a piece of 2mm steel and then dress it back with the rotary file.
So there we go, replacing that with that. And that should just fit in there like so. Right guys, let's weld it on. So I'm just going to use a little magnetic clamp just to hold it into place roughly. Just like that. And I can start welding. Right, it's all welded and I've used my belt sander to dress it all up. Now this is 2mm plate, as I've just said, so that's just as strong as the original now. Now I need to make another section what goes on top. You'll never know, hopefully. So, here's my cardboard template. Again, I'll cut it out, weld it in, boom. Right, so I've cut this bit out. I've put the little grooves in so it lines up with the top of this, which is pretty much how it was, because it went down to a flat piece like that. I've drilled the holes so I can plug weld it. I've also primed the back of this here, just to make sure it doesn't go rusty. Same process as this. I'll weld it on, clean the holes out, and then weld that bit. So again, I take my time in tacking this, but the beauty of this steel is because it's thicker, you can put a bit more heat into it, so it is a bit easier to weld. And there we go, guys. Welded, dressed, and once that's under seal, you're never going to know that's been touched. That's a really good repair, so I'm dead chuffed with that. Right, so the next job is going to be a harder job, and it's the top of this splash guard here. Now this bit is nice and easy. It's this bit I'm concerned about, so I need to kind of cut all this back. This is part of the inner wing. This is obviously the strut tower turret bit. That's 2mm thick. That's like thinner, maybe 1.2 thick. That's 1.2, and there's a bit of overlap here. So I just need to take it back layer by layer and see exactly what we want to work with. So I'm being super careful here because I don't want to remove the inner skin. It does actually look okay. So I'll just carefully peel it back and chop away at it. Right, guys, as you can see, I've kind of cut this out. Slight bend to it, which is going to fit here. I'm going to seam weld it and plug weld it. And there we go, guys, with some holes in it so I can plug weld it. Right, let's get it fitted. Right, guys, so I've welded this plate in now. Now I've seam welded across this edge here, I've stitch welded it, and I've plug welded it. So being 2mm, it's far stronger than it would have been originally. Much better for the 2-litre turbo conversion. So I'm dead chuffed with that, and the best thing is it still looks fairly OE. And once it's stone chipped and that, you're never going to know that's been touched. So I'm really, really pleased. The next job's to start on this front section here, and as you can see, it's very, very tatty. It needs a bit of love. So start by drilling the spot welds out and carefully prising back the panels just to see what I'm working with. Then I can make a few incisions with the grinder here and there. So I want to keep as much originality with this car as possible. So I'm cutting back the front panel. I'm going to repair sections rather than replace the whole thing, because overall it's in pretty good condition. So the main area of concern is the front inner wing. Both sides have been repaired okay in the past, but clearly done for like MOT standards, not for concourse show winning standards. Not that I'm saying this is going to be a concourse show winner, but if we aim for the stars, we might get to the moon or something like that. So as you can see, the top of the slam panel is all cut out now and it's pretty rusty on the underside. I think I can repair this really well, so I'm going to crack on with that now. So this is where we're at. This is the panel that's been removed and it's pretty rusty. So I'm going to make this first and I'm going to kind of build this in stages. The plan is I should be able to tie it all in then and get everything back in the right place perfectly, in theory. So let's start by making this. So I've cut this out, which is a little bit too big. I've done this deliberately. And I've marked this line here and this line here, which is basically the profile of that. So I'm going to start by bending that bit, stretching it a little bit, and then I'll do this side once I've done that side and just go from there. I've never really done anything like this before, so this is a learning curve for me as well. So very quickly, I've just put that in the vise and done that already, so already taking shape. Right, now I'm going to draw around it, cut that bit out, and we might have one bit done already. Boom, now I just need to dress it up with the belt sander. And there we go. So that is going to fit something like that. Perfect. Right, now I'm going to make this piece. Now I could have done it in one go, but I'm no professional and I'd rather just make this piece separately, weld it together, clean it up, make it one piece and try and make the whole thing out of one piece and screw it up. So I'm pretty happy with that so far. So I just need to drill these spot welds out here. So now it's removed, I just need to make one of these. So doing this kind of basic level metalwork is pretty achievable at home. You don't need too many fancy tools. Your main one is a vise and a hammer, if I'm honest. Obviously, a welder does come in very handy too,
but you can do a lot with not a lot. So if you're fairly handy anyway, give it a go. It isn't that hard, and the worst thing you'll do is waste a little bit of metal.
There you go, all welded up, penetrated from the other side as well, which is nice. So I'm going to dress that back. Boom. And there we go, all dressed. I think that looks really good. I'm really happy. So I haven't put the hole here, but I'm going to do that once the wing's on, so I know exactly where it is. But yeah, overall, really pleased with that. So it's going to literally fit like this and weld up nicely. And there we go, guys. That's that bit done. It's taken far too long, but I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looks pretty good. It's nice and strong. And once it's all painted and that, you're not going to know it's been done. So now I need to cut all this bit out and make this bit, because as you can see, that's pretty crap. Beautiful. Right, so I've just folded this tab back over and I've plug welded it, drilled the hole underneath, so I'm really happy with that. That's nice and straight. Now I'm going to concentrate on this area because I'm not happy with it. Now would be a good time for you guys to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and support the channel.
So like I've already said, this was all filmed a couple of years ago and it's far from perfect. The audio's not great in places, but I've spent a lot of time re-editing it, and hopefully you guys will still be able to enjoy it regardless of the not so good audio and video.
Look at the state of that. Barely welded. I mean, that bit's quite good actually, but yeah, the rest isn't. So I need to remake that better somehow. Wish me luck. So excuse the mess I'm in, but what I'm going to do is basically try and recreate this bit here, and then I'll worry about the front piece afterwards. So I think the easiest way to do that is to get a bit of cardboard and make a template, because obviously I'm kind of guessing a little bit because some of the original shape's being lost. I just need to kind of get it somewhere like. So let's have a go. Something like that. So cut that out. Boom, in a wing. Now obviously I need to kind of get that shape. So I'm just going to carefully bend it by hand and go from there, I think. So this line here is just going to match it with that swage line, so I can bend that. And that should just match it up nicely. Right, let's fire the welder up.
So start by tacking the top edge and then the side and just manipulate the metal till it fits perfectly. Go around it with a Hammond dolly and a couple of clamps as I'm doing so, till I'm happy with the fit. And after a couple of hours of welding both sides and dressing it back, I'm pretty happy with the fit. It looks pretty good. So a skimmer filler, it's going to be absolutely perfect. So yeah, I'm dead chuffed with this.
And as you can see, the headlight fits properly and clears the indicator. So I've just spent about half an hour or so making this cardboard headlight panel template. Now it fits pretty good, and I've spent a while looking at pictures of them to try and make it as similar as possible without having the exact dimensions. And I've also made sure things like the wing and the headlight fit. So I need to transfer this to steel now, cut it out, and then start folding it up. Right, so now it's cut out, I need to start folding.
So again, I'm just using basic tools. I'm using a chisel, a hammer, a vise, and that is about it. Obviously, tape measure and a pen. But yeah, all simple stuff that most people have in the garage. And that's the end result, not too shabby for a quick half an hour panel. And welded on and dressed back with the rotary file.
As you can see, the headlight fits, plenty of clearance around here. So yeah, dead chuffed.
Next up, engine fitting prep.
So to fit that 2-litre engine, I must give the alternator some clearance. Now there's two ways of doing that. Now the old school 90s way is to use one of these and hit that bit there. However, that isn't good enough nowadays. I want this to be strong and I want it to look good. So I'm going to do it this way. Right, so my plan is I'm going to cut the chassis leg across here and then make a 3mm box essentially, which is going to be recessed into the chassis, which will just give me enough clearance for the alternator. Now, I have experience of doing it the old-fashioned way and hitting this with a hammer. And yes, it does work. However, if you don't quite do it enough, which I didn't, when you hard accelerate, the alternator does this on the chassis. And it's really, really annoying. So we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it once, we're going to do it properly, and it's going to be nice and strong. So let's crack on. So I've looked at various images of these online, And what most people do is go just past there to about here and around here. You can do it a bit less. However, I'd rather do it more and make sure there's plenty of room. So I'm going to use a bit of masking tape to mask where I want it. So I want it to be as factory looking as possible. So I'm going to wear some PPE and I'm going to use a 4.5-inch grinder with a 1mm cutting disc. I'm going to make a slot down there, and then I'm going to carefully make a slot across here, not to the very edge, but quite close. Something along the lines of that. Now I'm going to use a belt sander just to clean it up. Followed by a flat disc on a grinder. And then finally I'm going to use a wire wheel on a drill just to clean the inside of the chassis leg. So now that's all cleaned up, I'm just going to put some extra primer on the inside just to protect it the best I can. Right, I just had a quick glance at mine over, and as you can see, I've actually cut the top of the chassis leg away slightly. So I'm also going to do that now on a GTE. Just like so. So now I need to make a box that's going to fit in there. I'm probably going to make it 20mm. And then go from there, I think. Right, so I've drawn around this, as you can see, and now I'm going to add 20mm to this edge here. So I'm going to cut around there, and I'm going to fold this line here. Then I'm going to have to add a bit what goes there, a bit what goes there, etc, etc. So again, I'll do a 20mm cut. And I think the other bits I'll add in afterwards, just to make it a bit easier. Let's start cutting. Right, so I've cut this out, I've scored the lines here. These need folded over to 90 degrees, and then I need to make the other little tabs that go around here. Weld it all together, and it should fit in there nicely. Lovely. Right, just need to make the strip there, strip there, strip there, and strip there. So there we go. Bit one is cut out. It just needs welding in, like so. Right, gonna cool this off and grind it down, clean it up. So as you can see, guys, I've dressed all the welds back down and I've painted it back. So when I weld it in, it's got a bit of protection. So this basically needs slotting into here now and welding into place. So start by tacking it in the corners, knocking it down with a hammer, making sure everything fits perfectly, and then I buzz it all up properly. So there we go, guys. It's all dressed back now, and I've primed it just to protect it for now. So basically, these panels are spot welded together. Now that is fine for a production car, but with a car of this nature, with this kind of power, we need something a little bit more. So what I'm basically going to do is an inch weld, then an inch gap, inch weld, inch gap across all the structural seams. So basically across the chassis leg here, around the engine mounts, around the tie rod mounts, all them areas which will be under a lot of load. This will just make it a little bit stronger and put a lot less load on the original spot welds. Before I begin welding, I need to clean up all the seams. So I'm going to use a wire wheel, a grinding disc, various attachments, sandpaper, etc. to try and get rid of all the paint, all the underseal, all the sealer, all the surface rust, etc, etc, to make a nice clean weld. So let's make a start. As this side's pretty much sorted with rust, I'm going to start on this one. I'm using my trusty old belt sander to start with. Alright guys, so I've cleaned up under here, as you can see, all around the seams. That is ready for stitch welding. Around here, it's all good. And also the inside seams, all nice and clean, so again, ready for stitch welding. I have come across a little problem on the tie rod mount, so I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to put some 2mm plate there to make it nice and strong, because this area does get pulled around a lot with the big engine. Obviously that bit's alright. A little bit of surface rust on the chassis leg, but they're quite thick, so I'm not too worried about that. So I'm going to start stitch welding and then I'll chop that out afterwards. So I'm literally going to do every inch. So try and mark it out. So let's see what happens then. So my advice when welding cars is to get the panels as clean as possible. However, you can never get them perfect. Now, a lot of these panels are sandwiched together, and if you're working on 30-year-old cars, you're going to have bits of surface rust between them, bits of paint, bits of undersill you can't get out. So don't expect a perfect weld when doing it, but you should be able to get a fairly good penetration and something that looks half decent. Got a blow through, so I'm going to use a little bit of copper pipe, flattened over on the other side, then I can weld through it without it sticking to the copper. It'll fill the gap up easier. Another top tip from me is make sure that if you are welding, for example, things like bulkheads, sills, floors, stuff like that, make sure the other side of the area where you're welding is free from underseal, carpets, interior trims, stuff like that. For example, if you're welding a bulkhead, make sure you pull the carpet and all the sound bedding back, because if you don't, it could very easily catch fire. Happened to me once, and you can get in a mess very, very quick. So I do not advise that. If you can, strip everything out the way, get a fire extinguisher ready, because you do not want that to happen to you. And obviously, just be sensible and keep checking your work, and don't finish welding and then lock up and leave it, because there could be a little fire which you don't know about. Right guys, that is one side done. So I need to repair this. And I also just need to repair this little bit here, which shouldn't be too bad because the hole's very minor on the other side. As you can see, I've stitched all down the legs. Nice and strong. Really happy. Right guys, as you can see, I've welded that and cleaned it back. All dressed. And we've also, as you can see, stripped the base. I've taken the servo off and taken the steering rack off. Steering rack's held on with 4 M8 nuts, as is the servo. There's a little clip what goes in the brake bar there, and there's also the UJ what goes inside there. So really straightforward to get out, and as you can see, it gives me a lot more room. So I've also dressed this side back. Obviously this bit needs cutting out, however I can still do most of the stitch welding on this side. Right, I'm going to crack on with the rest of the stitch welding now.
And there we go, that's all done, and I'm really chuffed with it. Right, next job is this area here. Now this is cracked. There's a hole behind it, and there's a big crack in the front here. It's a really common area on a Nova, and we need to sort it out. So I'm going to start by removing the outer panel here.
So I think rather than taking the full panel off, which looks a little bit more complicated, I think I'm just going to take it off to about maybe here, when I can cut it, and then I'll put a plate behind it so I can weld it back on nicely. So to start off with, I need to drill the spot welds out because there's quite a few holding it together. So I'm using a 6mm spot weld drill. So with this, you just got to take your time and look for the spot welds and just carefully drill them out. So I've drilled a few out, and I'm just going to use this very thin gasket scraper to start peeling it back. So you really do need to be careful doing this. It's super easy to damage the panels. So just take your time and make sure the spot welds are drilled out properly beforehand. And there we go, one panel removed. And look at the state of that. Absolutely horrendous. See, it's cracked across here, cracked across there. Yeah, we need to sort that out, don't we? So what I've done, I've used my trusty gasket scraper just to peel this back a little bit and just to see what we're working with. So this bit here is the inner turret. So that's like 2mm thick steel, nice and solid, nice and strong. This is the thin, flimsy stuff sandwiched between. Then there's the outer skin. So this is basically the inner wing material. So I was a little bit concerned that this is going to be flopping around, but because it's welded across here, across the bulkhead, welded to the chassis leg, and obviously it's welded to all of this, it's actually really strong still. No wiggling whatsoever, you can't even slightly move it. So what I'll do, I'll cut this bit out here. I'm just going to do it in small sections, I think. Fold the end over, make it really strong. I'm going to do it in 2mm plate, overlap the joins here, and that's going to be much stronger than the original one. So I'm going to get a grinder out now. I always use the 1mm Bosch cutting disc. Now these are designed for stainless steel, they last ages and they don't cost that much if you buy them in bulk.
So as you can see, these are obviously the inner turret bits. They're nice and sturdy, welded to that. So I can start chopping this out a little bit more
and then I can make a panel. Right guys, so as you can see, I've ground all the rusty skin off, so we're just left with basically the inner turret bit, which is really thick, really strong. I've made a cardboard template of exactly what I need. Should be this way, sorry. So I'm going to cut this out of 2mm thick steel, weld it in, and then I can cut the bottom off, fold it over properly so it's the original shape. Then I can start making this bit, and it shouldn't affect anything. And it should be a lot stronger than the original. Right, this is the panel, guys. I've primed the back and folded the bottom. I've also drilled a hole so I can plug weld it, and all of them is going to line up with these. I'm going to start attacking it on now. Needs a little bit of twisting to get into shape. I'm going to start doing that, I think, when it's, when I start attacking it.
So as you can see, I'm carefully welding the top edge using my trusty MIG. Once I'm happy that's all secured, I start pushing the lower edge down and tacking it into place. I use brute force and a clamp to achieve this. Then it's just a case of simply plug welding through to the original panel work. This method's tried and tested and gives a very strong OEM look once cleaned up.
So as you can see, that's all been cleaned back a little bit and primed. I've also primed the back of this piece here so that can be welded back on there. And once done, you're not going to really know it's been worked on, which is great.
So it's now time to weld the original outer panel back on, and then I'm going to stitch weld around the outside.
There we go, guys. All welded, ground back, prepped, painted. Going to give it a bit of seam sealer once the paint's gone off, and I can Gravitex it, and you're never going to know that's been repaired. So I'm dead chuffed for that. Right, now the outer bit is done, we're going to move on to the inner bit. Now this has had like an MOT patch in the past. 50 quid job, gets it for an MOT. 10 years ago it probably did the job. Now it's not good enough. We want it to look really nice under here. So I'm going to cut this out and try and make it seamless so you can't tell it's been repaired. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this panel out here, just cut the crap area out, and I'm going to make a little cardboard template and transfer it to some steel. Look at that, the offending item. So I've spent a little bit of time and I've made this panel which slots in just like so. It's got a slight curve here. I've tried to replicate this little swage line here and it didn't fit too bad. So once I start tacking it, I think I'll be able to twist it into place and make it fit perfectly.
So I made this panel using a vise to bend the verse profile, and I reclamped it slightly lower and used a blunt masonry chisel to fold over the second bend, essentially making a staggered parallel panel. I then curved the edge using pliers and a ball peen hammer. It was simple but effective.
And there we go, guys. So I've welded it, obviously. I've stitch welded this bit. I've gone around, cleaned it all up, dressed it back. And I think once it's had a little skim of filler, you're never going to know it's been done. So really happy with that. Right guys, a couple of days have passed since I did this bit. We're now on to the final bit of welding on the car, which is this horrendous piece here. Now all this inner wing is pretty rotten, if I'm honest. It's not nice at all. It's been badly repaired in the past. I want to cut it out and make good of it. So let's make a start. So if we're going to be completely honest, I don't really know where to start. It's a right mess. I think I'm just going to start cutting and hope for the best.
Once again, I'm using a trusty 4.5-inch grinder and a 1mm Bosch disc. Can't fault them.
Well, what can I say? It's worse than I thought, unfortunately. So there we go, that's some of the crap I've cut off. As you can see, really badly plated in the past. They've just kind of gone over the top of the old rust. That's no good, so I'm glad it's off. Let's start making some new bits. So I'm just going to use some cardboard to make a template, and I'm going to stick it together in sections basically to try and get my shape and profile right.
So I'm just using basic cardboard straight out of the recycling bin and then a Sharpie to draw around it. You really don't have to make this overcomplicated.
Right, so I've cut this first bit out and I'm going to make this in sections, I think, because it's going to be easier for me to bend and make it work properly with the limited tools I've got.
I then transferred the template onto some steel Draw around it with a pen and then cut out with a 1mm disc.
Voila! Right, now I need to start bending it, making it work. So straight away, it needs bending here on the chassis leg. Just like that, so it's going to go around the edge of the leg so I can bend that in the vise. Something along the lines of that. And then this corner across here just needs folding over slightly, just because this bit points up slightly. I can do that with some pliers, I think. Something like that. There's also a slight dip between them 2 points, and the lowest part of the dip is that centre there. So again, do it with some pliers. Something along the lines of that. Very, very minor. And the last bit just starts to curve upwards. So again, I'll do that in a vise. Just a gradual curve, and I can obviously perfect it. When I start tacking it, I can start panel beating it into shape. But that's my rough shape. I'm going to go around now with a sander, clean the edges up, and I can start tacking that into place.
So I've been using a cheap electric belt sander from Screwfix. The belts don't last very long, however it does make a really nice clean finish. I start with 60 grit and work my way up to 180. So I've always used the heat of the welder to my advantage. It's so much easier to bend hot metal, so tack away and bend as you go. Just make sure the rough shape's about right first and you're laughing.
As you can see, that's welded really nicely, that bit. Now I need to start just tweaking this bit a little bit. So there it is, all dressed back, welded both sides, really strong, really nice. I've just knocked this little piece up here, which is going to go here. Basically, I've bent it in the vise, I marked a few lines where the spaced lines are, bent that in the vise, and then this bit I've just formed by hand on the floor using a ball peen hammer. Really simple stuff. Fits in there pretty well, so I'm going to tack it in place and just start tweaking it a little bit more. So that's all dressed back now, and I've just put a little bit of extra primer on it just to seal it. So I've got to do this last piece now, but I'm going to do that off camera because I did the other side and filmed it. I don't want to repeat myself. So there we go, guys. I've made this panel and welded it in place. So that is the end of the welding. Now, I reckon I've had about 35 hours on this. I've used quite a bit of steel. I've used about 50 sanding belts. If you look here, lots and lots of the bloody things. I've used a handful of cutting discs, handful of grinding discs, but we've got there and we've saved this shell. And in my opinion, this is going to be good for another 30 years, providing I treat it properly.
Next job is to test fit the engine.
But before I can do that, we need to sort out the engine mounts. So in a previous video, we'd already filled these with PU adhesive just to make them nice and strong. These are original Nova mounts. It just makes them a bit stiffer. We've bought this brand new conversion mount. This is for the offside of the engine, off the shelf. It's about 35 quid off eBay, nice and easy. That's a standard rear Nova mount. As you can see, it's got 2 bolt fittings. That will fit the F20 gearbox. However, I always recommend fitting these. These basically convert it from a 2-bolt mount to a 3-bolt mount. The 5mm thick, so you essentially got 2 will go on one side, 1 will go on the other, and that also gives it a 10mm spacing, which pulls the engine over a little bit more to give you a little bit more alternator clearance. And then the front gearbox mount, believe it or not, is a standard Nova one, and it fits the F20 gearbox, so nice and simple. Right, these rear mounts. Now you can just space this off 10mm to give you a little bit more alternator clearance, and use some washers or a bit of flat bar, and then use 2 bolts through here into the F20 gearbox. It'll work, but in my opinion, it's not good enough. Obviously, if it's only got 2 bolts holding it in, if you accelerate violently, the engine's going to move. Eventually, these bolts are going to twist, they're going to snap, and if your gearbox drops down, which it will do, it could pull the steering wheel, it could do loads of horrible things. So, we're going to fit these proper spacers, which incorporates a 3rd bolt design. actual bolt onto the F20 gearbox. Now to fit them, you have to do a little bit of work. Now, there's a few ways of doing this. You can either just cut this little bit out there, so that slots in nicely, and that's it. Or, the way I tend to do it is I tend to cut it out, and then I weld these in just to make it a lot stronger. You're not relying on any kind of friction, then you know that's all adhered to one piece of metal, nice and strong. And then when you bolt it up, you kind of know that these aren't going to come loose at least. So I think we're going to do it that way. So I'm just going to start off by marking exactly where I need to cut. As you can see, this bit here is the issue. So I need to cut our bit out there, and the same on that side. And then I'm going to cut it with a 1mm cutting disc on the grinder. Right, these have all been cleaned back now, and this is ready to be welded onto here. Right guys, as you can see, I've welded them two together, and there's one on the outside. So we've got 10mm, 5mm, gearbox clamped to here. So that's a 10mm spacer, and now I need to weld these onto the engine mount. And as you can see, that isn't going anywhere. So I'm just going to dress it back, and then I can test fit it, and obviously I'll paint it at a later date. And there we go, all bolted up nicely. This is just a dummy gearbox I'm going to be using just to make sure everything fits. Right, so I've just bolted the dummy gearbox to the dummy block. I'm now going to winch it up, put it into place, and I can stick a head on it, put the turbo on it, and just make sure everything clears properly. There we go guys, it's in, bolted up. Now I did struggle to get the rear mount aligned, I don't know why, but what I did in the end was I loosened all the mounts off, put the rear one on first, then put the rest in, and it does seem to be okay now, so who knows, eh? Right, next job, I'm going to stick a cylinder head on it, stick a turbo on it, and see where things fit. And the first problem we got is that does not fit there. So I need to make a little incision here, make that fit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut across this line here, across the top so it doesn't look rough. So from the top, you're not going to really know it's been done. Trim a bit away and see if it fits. I think it will. And there we go, as you can see, all cut back. Now I will obviously dress it a lot more when I get the engine back out. But for now, just to test the fit in, that's pretty good. And most importantly, it does fit. Although I will say it's a little bit tight. Right, next job is the radiator and intercooler. So first off, I'm going to remove the spot welds from this bit here, this brace. That'll allow me to put the radiator through the front, nice and easy. And then once the intercooler is mounted, I'll make a new brace because this just isn't suitable. It's going to be in the way. Voila. So plan is to center the radiator like so. And then the intercooler should just fit down here, I've been told. Right, so this temperature switch has got to come off. Now I have looked into other options. You can get these but go in the top hose. I might even be able to cut that down and solder some wires on the end, just so it's a bit narrower. But we'll get it fitting first and then go from there. These are going to have to go, but it's definitely not going to fit in like that. So yeah, I'm going to have to make a little incision. Right, so once again, this is obviously going to need dressing up a little bit afterwards, but I'm just trying to make sure everything fits to start off with. So, radiator. Beautiful job that. Intercooler. Next job, I just need to mark the holes for the rod. As you can see, rad's fitted nicely. Obviously, I need to make some kind of mount at the top, but that's pretty good, and there's loads and loads of radiator clearance. Right, there we go. I'm absolutely dripping with sweat now because it's quite a warm day. I really ought to take my hoodie off, really. But the intercooler is actually fitted, and it fits really, really nicely. So I just need to make a stay now, and then we're away, really. I even think that's going to fit with a little bit of modification. So as you can see, I've just knocked this support panel up. Works really well. Slots in the front end like so. And then what I'll need to do is just drill this. I'm going to put some rib nuts underneath it. I'm going to put a bit of foam tape behind here to stop it rattling. That, as you can see, is nice and strong again. Right, so now that brace is done, the last thing I really need to do is drill a hole here and a hole here for the wiring loom to go through. Now, a lot of people just run the loom across here, which is where it would go in a normal Cavalier, and then down there. But I don't like seeing this bit. I like this bit to be nice and clean and tidy. So if you run it here, it kind of goes underneath the turbo cover, like so. You can't see any of it. It's a little top tip from me. So I put the battery back in just so I've got a good idea where it is, and because obviously I don't want the loom to hit it. And basically, it wants to be just about there. One bit of metal. That's the first hole, and then the second hole is just going to go down here. Just like so. Right, guys, I'm bloody exhausted, but I think that is the engine mock-up about sorted now. So I'm going to pull it back apart, and then I can start prepping for painting. So before I do too much, I want to clean a few things up. So this area here was cut out last week for clearance for the turbo hose. So obviously I did it with a grinder, but now the engine's back out, it's going to be a lot easier to clean. So first off, I'm going to clean that up, clean up a few little bits and bobs, and then we can go from there. So I'm just using a 60 grit flat disc just to clean up the bulk. Then I'm going to move on with an 80 grit rotary wheel on a drill. It just gets rid of the last few sharp edges. Right, now that's all cleaned up, I'm just going to use this little 3-inch DA sander just to clean up this area around there. The bits will need a bit of filler, just to give it a key so the filler can stick. So now that's sanded back, I'm just going to mix a little bit of filler up. Don't need much. Just to kind of go over them low spots and stuff. So as per normal, just a golf ball of filler to a pea of hardener and mix really well. Right, now we can just slap a bit on. Don't worry about getting this to look perfect. I've been using filler for years and years and I still struggle to get a remotely nice finish. Now the people on TikTok are clearly experts, but in reality you don't really need to be that good. You just spend a little bit longer sanding. It's that simple. So the plan is to high build prime the whole engine bay. I'm going to Gravitex the bottom half, you know, the lower bits like this. But the top half I want to look really nice. So we're using some 240 just to go over this, get rid of some of the surface rust, and then that'll be ready for painting that top bit. So I bought this little DA sander really cheaply off eBay. I think it's about 35 quid. It was an absolute bargain and it's really, really good for getting into the awkward areas. As you can probably see, I'm concentrating on the top half of the bay. This is the bit you can see the most of. So I want that bit to look great. There is the odd bit of surface rust here and there, the odd bit of spidering, but the sander's making proper light work of it. I use 80 grit just to roughly shape the filler with a DA, and then I move on to 180 and 320. Now I kind of use a DA and I also use a sanding block and I do some of it by hand. Combination of all three. So high build primer covers 320 really well. However, if you are just using normal primer, I would recommend going much finer, maybe something like 500 or 600 grit. So as you can see, I've blown in both inner wings with some extra primer just to make sure the filler work looks okay and it looks more than presentable. Now the owner of the car is stressed, he does not want this to be mint, he just wants it to be practical and usable and look nice. So I think we've achieved that. So the best washing up bowl is back out once again. I don't think this has been in the garage for a year. It's back out, I've got some Scotch-Brite, got some warm soapy water, and we're literally just going to go over all this and clean it up. Now this stuff is a lot better for areas like this. Sandpaper doesn't flex as well as this does. This is really good at getting the grime off as well, so the soap in the water is going to really help with that. You can see already it's coming off beautifully. And if there is any areas afterwards what I'm not happy with, I can go over it with some 320 because I'm going to high build the whole thing anyway. Right, so I've given everything a really good clean and a rub down, a little bit of a key. I've cleaned it all the best I can for this stage anyway. So the next job is to go around with some PU adhesive, put some sealant around some of the edges, and then we can move on to the Gravitex. So this is the stuff I'm using, just normal PU adhesive, like Tiger Seal kind of thing. I'm just going to go around some of the little joints under here. Just use a finger, just like the factory would have done. Well, they probably wouldn't use the finger, but to give that kind of look. So I really want this car to last. So fingers crossed the sealant should help stop the water ingress. And obviously it gives more of a factory finish too. All sealed up nicely, and this will hopefully stop the water ingress. Right, so I've just gone around and masked a few bits up. I have X-primed a few of the bare metal bits, and I'm just going to put some Gravitex on the lower sections now. If you wasn't aware, Gravitex is overpaintable stone chip protection. As you can see, that lower section is all done, as is the inner arch. Now I did run out of grey, so I had to go to black, but it doesn't really matter. Cross member, and the near side inner arch. Right, so it's been 24 hours since the Gravitex has been put on. It's gone off well. Next step, I'm going to 400 wet and dry the whole engine bay, ready for primer. Right, engine bay is now ready for primer, and I've also quickly just done the rocker cover and the cam belt cover. So I need to mask up now, and then we can start painting. This kind of bodywork's really dusty, and obviously tape does not stick to dust. So make sure you thoroughly blow gun everything off before you start. As they say, paint's 95% prep. So I always use cheap painter's polythene on the roll. It's static, so it sticks to the car really well. It's so much easier and faster than using traditional paper. Right, we've blown everything off with the air gun, and now it's just a case of panel wiping everything down, and we can start priming. So I'm literally just using standard panel wipe. It's not very expensive, like 20 quid for 5 litres or something like that. Lasts ages. And I'll use this to clean everything up. This stage is really important. Any oils or silicons can make the paint fisheye really easily. My advice is don't risk ruining your paint, just give it a good panel wipe first. Right, so we're mixing high build primer now. This is mixed 4:1, and this is great for covering a multitude of sins. I'm going to give it a good shake. And then I'm going to start with around 250 ml. Now I have no idea if that's the right amount. I am no pro, so we're just going to lag it. So it's 4 parts paint to 1 part hardener. Hardener. Just standard fast cure hardener, nothing fancy. Right, now we're going to give it a good stir with a stirring stick. This is a proper paint stirring stick, this is not an old screwdriver. And it's just a case of pouring it in the gun. And we'll see if that's enough. I don't think it will be, but I don't want to waste it at the same time. Right, I'll see you when it's painted. So I've just kind of done the bits I really want to look really nice. So these bits here, obviously your key areas to your engine bay. So if I block all them back down, they're going to look great. And I've also done the engine covers, as you can see. Now I'm going to give it 24 hours and I can block it all back. And we can go on to top coat and lacquer. Boom. Right, so we're 24 hours later. Everything's obviously completely dry now. Now there was a couple of little bits I weren't happy with. So I've gone around with some dolphin glaze and just touched a couple of bits up, which is like a really fine filler. I've also kind of given everything a bit of a mist coat with some darker paint. So when I sand it back, I'll be able to identify any low spots I'm not happy with. So I'm going to start sanding it now. wish me luck, because I hate doing this.
Go over the Dolphin Glaze for 180 grit, just to get the shape, and then I'll work up to 600 grit. The rest of the high build and the primed areas get 600 straight away. Like I said before, we don't want perfection, just a tidy, clean bay.
Right, so as you can see, I've cleaned it all back, sanded it all back, I've gone through all the grades. I've also gone over with some grey aerosol, grey primer in a couple of bits where I went back to metal, just to help the paint stick. So now I need to move this masking tape further up because I'm going to blow some of this battery tray in. Then degrease, and then we're away. So believe it or not, I've been 10 hours doing this week. My fingers are red raw. I'm knackered if I'm honest. However, we've got there. So all I need to do now is, like I say, remask, quick clean up, spray it, get some lacquer on it, and we're done. Thank God.
This whole area is going to be covered with carbon fibre panel. However, it doesn't seem right not to paint it. It's the same process as before. Blow it all off first, then apply the tape. Sadly, I can't remove the heater blower because the stuff feels like it's going to snap and I don't want to cause any more work. So for now, I'm just masking it.
Right, I'm going to use a tack cloth now just to go over the top bits, basically try and get as much dust off as possible. Right, that's all done. Let's get the paint mixed. Right, so one mixing cup. And then we've got 1 litre of 83L Vauxhall Mistral Grey, common Nova GTE colour. Looks nice, like a metallic. Now this is a base coat, so that means needs mixing with thinners 50-50. And then that needs mixing with 2K thinner. Again, I want 200 ml of that, so that's 1 to 1, 400 ml in total. Then I'm going to use this sieve, paint sieve, and this mixer, which is not a welding rod. And away we go. Right, let's start painting. Next time you're going to see the car, it's going to be painted.
And that's it. A couple of coats of base coat and a good few coats of lacquer. It's all done and looking great, if I do say so myself. Really happy with this. Right, it's been a couple of days. I've demasked it and I've also started cleaning things like this up. So I've just painted this wiper motor and put a few bits of edging trim on, cleaned some hoses up, various wires and bits, put the steering rack back on, cleaned all that up. And now I've done all that, we're pretty much ready to start putting the engine back in.
So the servo bolts on through the bulkhead with 4 M8 lock nuts. Now there is a clevis pin on the back that slides through the plunger and the brake bar and is connected to. This is secured with a spring clip. So the original metal brake pipes are really clean, however they did have some paint loss on the end from previous brake fluid leaks. This wouldn't do for this engine bay. We'd spent quite a lot of time making it look nice and it would be a shame to leave them like this. So I sanded them back, gave them some extra primer and some gloss black just to finish them off. You can't really get the brake pipes on wrong. All 4 of them are a different shape and they've got 2 different types of fitting nuts. So just take your time, observe where they go. It's fairly straightforward. So make sure the brake pipes are all fitted properly on the bulkhead and in the chassis legs before I finally tighten them into the brake master cylinder. And that's the servo master cylinder and brake lines all fitted up. I then pull the main wiring loom through the bulkhead from the cab. I've been using Tessa cloth tape, which is like a VAG factory tape, just to tidy the whole thing up and get rid of the 30-year-old tape what was on it. I think this gives it a really modern day, clean factory look. So the screen wash wiring originally went round here. I've got rid of the tank and I wanted to make it hidden underneath the scuttle area. So I've extended the brown wire, cut the loom back, and I made it feed through the original hose from it, which is there. It's nice and factory looking, obviously. I found some more dodgy repairs in the loom further down. So I'm going to leave the loom for today because I really want to get the engine in. That could go out here out the way, but doesn't that look really good? I'm really pleased with that so far. Right guys, engine's out. As you can see, I'm going to put the last few bits on. So we need to put rock cover on, injectors, finish the loom, and then it can go in. There's the rock cover looking very nice. I need to put the new seal on. Then we can just slide her on. Brand new stainless steel bolts. Right, I've just checked and we're actually torquing them to 8 Newton meters. Again, a bit like the Sun, these are known for leaking, so you're best torquing them up and then they're less likely to leak. Right, they're all tight now, so we're going to put the spark plugs in. Now these are just standard LED spark plugs. However, I probably would recommend RS Turbo ones, gap to 0.7 I think it is. It's a little bit hotter. They can stand the heat a bit more, but these will do for now. We might upgrade later down the line. Right, now I'm going to put the plug leads in. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've also got the plastic retaining clip one needs to go in the end there. Beautiful. So finally the cover. Doesn't that look nice? So we can now move on to the injectors. Now we've opted for Saab bred injectors. These are 360cc standard as opposed to the standard LET ones which are 310cc. Because the ECU on this car is chipped, you can't run the standard injectors on the standard fuel pressure regulator. But if you run these injectors, you can run the standard fuel pressure regulator. That's the option we've kind of gone for, and it's tried and tested and seems to work. All 4 injectors have been professionally tested and cleaned, and they're fitted new filters. Some of them were a little bit down on efficiency, so it was £50 well spent to ensure this engine's not going to run lean and not going to melt a piston. The injectors simply push into the inlet manifold. We use a little bit of lube on each seal just to help them in, and then the fuel rail pushes on top of that, and it's held on with 4 retaining clips. I then fasten the loom to the injectors and fit the ECU earths to the top of the studs. I clip on the final loom plugs and then secure the fuel tank valve. Right, so timing covers on, put the belt on, I've sorted a couple of little bits. We now need to take the engine off the stand, put the crank seal in, put the flywheel on the clutch. Liam's here, he's the owner of the car. He's just polishing the oil cap for it because that's all he can do really.
Shut up. Winged you out.
And he's going to help me put the engine in basically. So let's get this off the stand. Right, brand new rear crank seal. That's going to go in there. My advice is to take your time putting these seals in. You don't want to get it wrong at this stage. Ideally use a large socket or bit of pipe to apply even pressure all the way around the seal as you knock it in. I didn't have anything that big, so I just took my time, I lubed the seal up and just carefully knocked it in with a little hammer. We cleaned the flywheel up with a wire wheel and some sandpaper just to make sure it was nice and clean. Then we fitted new bolts, we Loctited them in and torqued them up to the correct torque settings. Right, annoyingly, the pressure plate was the wrong one. It's for a flat flywheel. And we've got a pot flywheel, so we've used a C20 LET outer pressure plate, which I had a good one in stock, and a brand new LUK friction. So hopefully that's going to work. Right, we've had a few issues with the clutch, but we've got there. Gearbox is now on, starter motor's on, ready to go in, aren't we, Liam?
We're ready.
Boom, let's do it. So we've just masked up this end of the engine because we're a little bit scared of scratching it. It obviously does look really nice. We've lifted the car up a little bit. The idea, we're going to tuck it underneath and then put the crane over the top and hoist it up, hopefully. So, I'll drop that down. This is how they used to do it at Vauxhall. Just the same. Right. Happy with that, mate? So we're going to put the rear mount on first, 'cause I had trouble with that last time. Just going to put a little bit of Loctite on each bolt, just to be safe. Beautiful. The engine's carefully winched into place. It's really not the easiest job, but with a bit of to and fro in, we got there. Liam's extra pair of hands made the job so much easier. Right, as you can see, I'm bloody dripping with sweat. It's like 29 degrees, really hot. It's a little bit awkward to get in. We obviously didn't want to damage anything. We have scratched a little bit of paint on the sand, but nothing serious. Something to touch up. But it is mounted on its mounts now, so we can take all this crap off. Oh, and then start doing some of the smaller bits.
Right, let's get it running.
But before we can do that, we need to fit the turbo and quite a few little bits and pieces. So Liam, at the minute, is currently just stripping the turbo off because we're going to put new hoses on it. We're going to give it a quick clean, and then we can put it on. So we've got new silicone hoses to put on it, water feeds, new braided oil hose, and we're just going to give it a quick clean because it's a little bit dusty. So I've just taken the end of the turbo off, cleaned it out. There was a little bit dust in here, checked all in here. Got no gasket for this, so I'm just going to use some gasket sealer essentially just to smear around the edge. And then bolt it back together, put the new lines on, and away we go. So the intake to the turbo is held on with 6 M6 bolts. Now I'll loosely put these on with the impact driver and then I'll torque them by hand afterwards. We'll then move on to the coolant lines. There's one on the front and there's one on the rear. These are bolted on a threaded union, nice and simple. And lastly, we fit the oil return pipe. This just pushes on and has a couple of Jubilee clips holding it. Now it's just a case of bolting the turbo to the cylinder head. It's held on with studs and nuts, and we went for some new copper lock nuts and stainless steel washers. Liam then torqued it down and I fit the stainless steel heat shield. That's the turbo done for now. Right, so I've just put the digi on, put the coil on, put the Bailey header tank on. I'm waiting for the bolts to dry because I've just painted it. Now we're just putting fuel lines on. So put a union on there, got a bit of length fuel pipe here. This is high pressure fuel pipe, which just needs connected into the proper line down here. Then same for the return. So we are getting there, guys. Right, so we've done the fuel feed. We're now doing the fuel return, which is this pipe here. Just going to extend it by that much. As you can see, that's done nicely now. All clipped up. I just need to push that onto the union. A little bit awkward. That's the fuel lines all done. I'm really happy with the overall look and fit of these. I think they look really good. Right, Liam. Do you want to fire the fuel pump up? See if we've got any leaks. Yes, we do. Not even touched that. It's leaking out the end of the fuel rail. It's leaking out of here. So there must be some kind of gasket or something on the end of that. It doesn't feel tight. It's not tight. It's finger tight, guys. So someone's had this apart. This is the problem when you buy engines in bits. I'll just take it off and inspect it. There you go. So it's just a square O-ring gasket. Looks in pretty good order, to be fair. It's nice and clean. So I'd imagine all we need to do is tighten it up. Just to be sure though, we're just going to go with some wet and dry. Just clean that face up. So quickly clean this up, lubricate the seal and bolt it back together. Just checking the other end's tight. Alright, let's try again. Can't see anything. It looks like the leak is cured. So we're kind of getting close to a startup. I wanted to start it, however, the oil feed pipe for the turbo doesn't fit the union. It only just screws on. So I tried to tighten it up and it just ripped the threads out the end. It only goes on a thread. That's the wrong one. This is off eBay. How much was it, Liam? About 80 quid? 60 quid? Yeah, a lot of money. Doesn't fit. We bought it months ago, so
I come from abroad.
good luck with getting that sorted. But yeah, a bit frustrated. He's going to go to a local hydraulic place though and see if they can cut the end off and get something that fits that. Because the original C20 Let one was knackered. But hey ho. We're now feeding the cables through the bulkhead. Liam's doing the clutch cable and I'm doing the throttle and the bonnet release. They're really tight and it's a little bit tricky, but we do get there in the end.
2 days later.
We managed to get a local hydraulic company to make up a new hydraulic line for the turbo feed. Most importantly, it fits the union perfectly and only costs 20 quid cash. I don't think the boss was about at the time. So I'm fitting the brand new braided oil feed line to the turbo. Got a couple of washers, copper washers these are. To make sure they're nice and clean, as is the turbo, and it literally sandwiches between them. So the line goes over one washer. A little bit awkward. Like so. You put the top washer on. And then the locking nut. basically a banjo setup, but it's a stud instead of a bolt. And that tightens with a 16mm spanner, or socket obviously. The rem fits on the back of the block here, and then that just tightens up with a 19mm spanner. So I don't want this just flapping around, so I'm going to use a P-clip just to secure it. I'll go into one of the sump bolts like that, I would imagine. Beautiful, that. Right, I'm now going to put the elbow on the turbo, and I'm going to use some brand new M8 bolts to do so. Now, you can get gaskets for these, but originally they didn't have one. They're literally just a machined face. And they're both same metal, so you shouldn't need a gasket in theory. We'll try it out. I'm using spring washers as well, just to try and keep it secure. Right, now that's tight, I'm going to put the lamp sensor in. This just tightens up with a 22mm spanner. So I've just clipped in the lamp sensor plug, which goes all the way around here and plugs in near the ECU bulkhead plug. I now need to put the brake servo hose in so it's got no vacuum leaks. I think this is the standard Nova GTE one. I'm pretty certain from memory they work, or they can work. This screws to the bottom of the inlet manifold, and then simply just plugs into the servo. Lovely. So guys, I've just been doing the vacuum pipes and the pipe work, and this is quite complicated if you don't know what you're doing. So I just thought I'd show you how it should be, just to try and make it a bit easier if you're doing it yourself. Right, so we've got a big large breather from the rocker cover which goes to the top of turbo, and then that tees off, goes to the amyl valve. Now that's basically the waste. When the amyl valve loses the boost pressure, so it like dumps it off, it just puts it into here, straight back in the top of the turbo. So the fuel pressure regulator goes to the hot start valve, then comes out the hot start valve and goes into one of the ports on the throttle body there. The right hand throttle body goes to the tank valve, which we won't be using, so that's just being plugged off. An amyl valve, you've got one pipe which goes to the turbo actuator, and the other pipe which goes across here, and that goes to the turbo itself. So if you wanted to put a boost gauge in, for example, you'd want to take it from, probably, you'd want to tee into one of these really, so it comes from the manifold. I hope that makes sense. Also, the ECU has a vacuum pipe going to it, or a pressure pipe, however you want to call it, and that runs across here in the loom and then goes to the bottom of the throttle body down there, which you can't really see, but trust me, it does. I hope that's helpful. I've just put some clips on these vacuum lines. It's now time to put some oil in, and we can start connecting some wires up and turn it over. Right, I've connected the ECU up. I've connected the ignition feed to the ECU, and I've just put it on the battery for now. Fuel pump's wired up. Everything's plugged in. I think I've got all the hoses on. So I think it should start now. I've cranked the engine. I've got the oil pressure up. There's plenty of oil in the engine now. So shall we give it a go? Whoa, that was a genuine first start. Right, I've just connected the intake to the turbo. It's not got an intercooler, but I've just kind of roughly put a pipe on just to give it another go, because obviously it's not going to run properly without that. Right guys, I'm just doing a bit more wiring on this Nova conversion. Now this is the original Nova loom here. We've got 5 wires, so I just wanted to make things a little bit clearer for you guys if you're doing this at home. So, the black with red trace goes to the starter motor. Now that's the little exciter wire which makes the starter motor crank.
This blue wire, slightly green tinge to it, goes, well, it would have gone to the original coolant temperature sensor wire. Now we don't need that anymore because the C20 let loom has one built in. So we can ditch that. This blue wire with a green trace goes to the oil pressure switch. This blue with white trace, that goes to the alternator. And again, that makes the alternator work. So that clamps to it. If that's not on, the alternator will not work. And finally, we've got a black with a yellow wire, which I believe is maybe something for the automatic choke, not sure. It's got an ignition feed to it when the ignition's on. But again, we don't need that, so that can be trimmed back. So as you can see, I've cut these two wires back, staggered the cuts, and I've also put heat shrink over the end and just flattened it. So when it's hot, I just squish it together and it just sticks together, makes it nice and watertight. Now I can wrap the loom up with some loom tape and jobs are good.
So I'm now moving on to the battery cables. The original Nova Airs were in pretty poor condition and the battery lead from the starter motor to the battery wasn't quite long enough, so I had to do something about it. I used 16mm square cable to make a new negative terminal loom. I crimp the connectors and cover them with a 4:1 glue type heat shrink. This gives a really modern factory finish. The crimping tool I'm using is hydraulic and clamps the terminals effortlessly. My advice is to make sure your fingers are well clear, as this thing is taking no prisoners. I find a cheap heat gun is just the right temperature to shrink the heat shrink, but not melt it like a blowtorch would. I then bolt the wire to the new negative battery post, and that's the earth done. The battery positive is also done in 16mm square cable. This time I obviously use red. I use around 5 inches of new loom. I connect the butt connector at one end and a terminal on the other. Then it's crimped onto the car, I then slide over 2 layers of heat shrink. I first off use the black 4:1 heat shrink, which has the glue inside, and then I go over the top with the red stuff just so it looks better. This wire is now fed through the original bulkhead grommet and bolted up to the new positive clamp. The main fuse box feed is also bolted to this, along with the shortened ECU battery positive loom. I think it looks much better than before and I'm really pleased with how well it all fits. Not only that, it should help the car be really reliable. So now the battery looms are all sorted, I can turn my attention to the rest of the engine bay wiring. So firstly, I soldered the ECU ignition feed into the Nova loom. This is really easy and it's just a case of looking for a black ignition feed wire. It's in the near side where the original coil would be. This section's then all finished off with a tester tape. This is cloth tape and it gives a really nice factory look. I then clip up the rest of the slam panel loom. Right, excuse the sweating, it's a very hot muggy day in England. I'm going to fit some water pipes now. Start with the heat matrix pipes. The one behind the inlet manifold is really tight, but we do get it on. I then move to the bleed hose that comes off the back of the throttle body and then tees into the header tank. I'm going to be honest, this was an absolute nightmare and I should have done it when the engine was out, but never mind. I use a flexi 1/4 inch extension with a 7mm socket to tighten it up. I don't like using screwdrivers on these clips because you can damage the ends, and I just think it gives a better overall finish if you use a socket. I then fit the hose that goes from the plastic L-shaped rear pipe to the header tank, and then I fit the bottom hose. The hose actually needed cutting down a bit because the radiator was no longer in the original place and moved it more to the centre. I did this to allow the intercooler to fit. I then connected the turbo water outlet to the T-piece that also connects the blue pipes together. Right, that's all the hoses on I think. Now it's time to put the rad in. The radiator is a really tight fit now. It nearly touches the compressor housing on the turbo, so I have to be really careful. Once it's in and seated in the grommets, I connect the top hose and the bleed hose from the top of the rad to the water feed on the turbo. Originally this would have gone straight to the header tank, but it now has to run through the turbo and it also tees into the bleed pipes. Right, that is all the hoses fitted, which means I can fill it with coolant. However, we do have one slight problem, and that is this. So this is a temperature switch for the radiator. So when this gets to a certain temperature, the fan will kick in. So normally that'll just fit in there like so. But the problem we have is the intercooler's here. So that's going to foul it. So what I want to do, because I want to keep this working, so I want to cut the end of this off and then solder 2 bits of wire to the end of them pins. So basically it sticks out less. Then hopefully I can make some kind of multi-plug what goes on here. And away we go. So I've just soldered 2 little leads on the end, like I said I would. Put a bit of heat shrink on. And just to prove that it worked, at the minute it's basically high resistance. You watch that, that should drop. Should go to 0. There you go. That's working perfectly. And there we go, the finished thing. I've put some heat shrink on it and I've also sealed the end with some RTV. Right, so we've got a new copper washer. And I'm just going to carefully put it on. Once tightened up, I connect the loom up using bullet crimps. One of the wires is live, so always use the female insulated crimp on these to avoid short circuits if it's unplugged. A pet hate of mine is coloured terminals. I really can't stand them, so I always colour them in heat shrink. I think it makes the repair or modification look nearly factory, and it also takes your eye off it as it's no longer a bright colour. And that is finished, and I think that looks pretty damn good if I do say so myself. Right, as you can see, it's very tight, the rad's in. I can now fit the intercooler. And the stay bar, which I've painted, and I've also put some foam tape on the back to stop it rattling. I made the stay a tight fit on purpose to prevent the intercooler from rattling on the radiator. The foam tape just helps everything sandwich together nicely. Right guys, so we're going to move on to the boost pipe. So first off, we're going to fit this dump valve to the top of the top hat. I've already kind of started mocking up where the pipes are going to go. I've got some 45s and I've got some straights, etc. So it shouldn't be too hard to do this. I clamp the dump valve to the top hat via a T-piece. Then I fit the cut down 45-degree hose to the bottom of the intercooler. This is just put on loosely until the aluminium 45 is fitted and joined up to the dump valve via a length of straight hose. It's getting really tight now, so I've got to be super careful where I put the hose clips because there's very little space to tighten them up. Once everything's fitted, go around and tighten all the clips up. I think the overall look of this is really good and it didn't actually cost that much to pull it off. The compressor housing to the intercooler is made of a couple of 90s joined together with a small section of stainless steel pipe. Again, it's a tight fit but should flow pretty well. So this is the original Nova wiring for the fan, and I need to join it to the aftermarket van. Right, so black on a Vauxhall's an ignition feed, and the brown with the white trace will be an earth. So the brown and white needs to go to the black, and this blue needs to go to this black. A little bit complicated, but hey ho. I cut the plug off and stripped the wires back using these Irwin strippers. They're a great tool for anybody who does a bit of DIY wiring. They're so much easier to use than side cutters. These are then crimped up and insulated accordingly. And that is that done. I'm just going to clip it up out of the way now, and the fan should now work. So guys, that is pretty much under the bonnet now sorted. I've put some water in it just to kind of check the system, make sure there's no leaks, flush it out, then I'll put antifreeze in at a later date. All the pipes are connected, radiator's sorted, intercooler's all sorted, wiring's all sorted. So I think we're pretty much ready to start the next thing, which is the exhaust. Now this is a Calibra turbo downpipe. It's 2¼ inch, but it's been adapted quite badly here. So my plan is I need to cut it here, add some 45s and then connect it up to the existing Nova system. So before I can do anything, unfortunately, I've had to repair this elbow. I didn't realise, but the threads were missing on one side. So I'm tapping it out to an M10 instead of an M8. And I've got a nice bolt, which is the same length as the original. So I put a little tack weld there, just so that'll stop at that point, so it can't screw in any further. So the tension should be correct on the spring. With a tap like this, you just want to take your time, backwards and forwards. Don't try and do it all at once because you'll snap it. And that should now screw into that. Beautiful. So that is problem number 1 sorted. The next issue is I need to get that to fit that. I'm using a trusty battery operated grinder with a 1mm cutting disc. It makes light work with a stainless steel pipe. So since I've had this TIG welder, I've had mixed success. So I've had some advice from a few people. I'm going to have a go just TIGging this bit of stainless to this bit of stainless. Now this is the reducer to make the Calibra downpipe fit the 2-inch Nova system. I think in the past I haven't cleaned the metal up well enough, so I wire wheeled and degreased everything first. I then just took my time and tried not to dip tungsten, and that's not an innuendo. The first weld came out pretty well and it gave me the confidence to carry on. That's not too bad, that bit. So practice makes perfect. I'm just going to keep having a go, see what I can do. So I've just cleaned this with a bit of acetone and now I'm going to have a go just welding this flexi to the reducer. The machine is set to 45 amps DC and we're using a 1.6mm red tungsten with pure argon. Absolutely thrilled with that. I think that's come out pretty good, to be fair. I've just done the other side too. So yeah, not bad actually. And there we go, guys. Obviously I need to practice a little bit more, but I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think it's come out too bad. Top bit's not the best, if I'm honest. Now I've done that bit, so I might grind this top bit back off and just do it again. But yeah, overall, pretty damn happy. Right, with a modified turbocharged car, especially an older car like this, I would recommend fitting a wideband oxygen sensor. Now that's basically a high-end oxygen sensor what reads fairly good range, so it can detect if the car's running rich or lean, essentially. You've got a gauge on the dash and it'll tell you. Now, obviously, if the car runs lean, it doesn't have to run lean for very long, it could melt a piston very easily. So it's just a good safety device. Now, on a turbocharged car, they recommend fitting it about 30 centimeters from the turbine housing. So I'm going to try and fit it past the sump. And it also needs to be minimum 10 degrees upwards. So we're going to try and do that as well. Let's have a look. Right, so I've had a quick look and I think the best place to put the sensor is around here. It's not quite a 30 centimeters from the downpipe, but it's very, very close. Also, plenty of room to point it upwards. I was going to put it near the dry shaft, but there's not a lot of room. And I think if it's too close to the bottom of the sump, it's just exposed. So I think here is going to be the best bet. So I'm just going to draw around the boss, just so I know exactly where I want it. Now the boss was a few quid off eBay. It is stainless steel. And it's a lot easier than messing around doing it any other way. Just literally drill that out, weld this in, Bob's your uncle. So I'm just cutting off the unwanted part of the downpipe in preparation for later. Nice clean cut. I'm just going to clean that up with a flat disc now and away we go. I use a cone cutter to drill a hole and then clean up the area with a flat disc. I want it to be spotless to aid welding in the new insert. And there we go, guys. Boom, all done. So I'm now going to have a go TIG welding this on. Again, the machine is set to 45 amps. This time I used less filler rod and tried just to melt the two pieces together to give a really smooth, nice weld. And there we go. I am pretty happy with that, if I'm honest. Don't think it's come out bad at all. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. So guys, I'm just cutting some 45 degrees to bend the downpipe out of the way. And I thought I'd show you a little tip to cut straight. So if you use an old clamp like so, clamp it around the pipe, make sure it's nice and square. You then use this as a guide with your 1mm cutting disc to cut it out. And then once you've cut it out, you can go over the cut edge with a belt sander in the vise, just a normal woodwork belt sander, and that gives it a nice, flat, good finish. It's now time to butt weld the 45s together. So that is the 245 degrees welded to the downpipe. So this is going to wrap around the sump nicely. All I've got to do now is join the flexi to this and we are done. I'm pretty pleased with it though. I've never done any butt welding on stainless before and I think it's come out pretty damn good. So I'm really happy. It's now time to bolt the downpipe back up. I'm using an Evo 7 bull ring gasket as it's the same size. None are listed for the Cavalier Turbo for some reason. Once bolted up, I slide on the new flexi down the pipe, mark where it joins up to the original system and cut the pipe down with a grinder. Again using a Jubilee clip to help me cut a nice straight line. The pipe is then cleaned up with a flat disc. I'm using a VAG style sliding clamp. They tend to come apart much easier than your normal U-clamps. They offer a clean look and are readily available. I could have also used the V-band, but this was a cheaper option and it works just as well. Once happy with the fitment, I tack the flexi to the downpipe of the car. The ECU is unplugged to save any potential spikes. I then remove the downpipe to finish off the weld on the bench. My welding is improving with each pass, so I grind back the first weld I did and redo it. This time it looks much better. I then sand it all back and give the front section a coat of very high temperature silver. So there we go guys, the downpipe's made. It's good size, 2¼ inch going down to 2 inch, which would be suitable for this kind of power. Looks tidy. I'm pretty happy with it to say I've never done this before. So yeah, dead chuffed. I'm going to fit it on the car and then we're done. Now it's finished, I can fit the new AGM wideband lambda sensor. This just screws up like a normal sensor but reads the oxygen levels much better. I then bolt the downpipe for the final time and tighten up the clamp. So guys, that's the downpipe back on, the wideband sensor's back on, and I've also welded a bracket on the back of the downpipe just to support the flexi a little bit, you know, give it a little bit of extra strength. We don't want it to rattle around. As we are nearing the completion of this project, we're going to start building the body panels back up, putting the wings on, putting the bumper on, etc, etc. So I think the first place to start is going to be this front near side of wing, so let's get it on. This slots on and bolts up with Anki screws. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put all the bolts in loosely, and then once the bonnet's on and the other wing's on, everything else is on, I can then make sure all the panel gaps are as good as I can get them and then tighten it up. That's the best way to do it, I find. There are 6 screws across the top, 2 behind the bumper, 1 behind the side skirt into the sill, and then 2 from behind the kick panels inside. They should all have 10mm headed Anki screws, and these are like a core self-tapper which go in with a normal hex drive. Nice and easy. So that's the wing loosely put on. Next up is the bonnet stay, because I'm about to put a bonnet on. So I've given this a quick refurb, I've sanded it down, X-primed it and painted it black, and it looks a lot better now because it was quite rusty. So the crep pins are long since gone. These are literally nails I cut down and painted them black. And as you can see, they work just as good. Hold the clip nicely. Beautiful. Next up, I'm just going to mask along here a little bit because I'm about to put the bonnet on by myself, which isn't advised. So this should just help me protect the paintwork. I really wouldn't advise doing this by yourself, but sometimes you have to do these things. The bonnet bolts up with 4 M6 bolts. Top tip from me is to line everything up with the original paint marks. That way nothing should need adjusting. It should just all line up perfectly. So next job, the cam cover is going to hit this area here. So you either need to dint this in or cut it out a little bit. So we're going to lower the bonnet down slowly, see where it touches, and then just have a little trim. So I'm not really happy with this bit here. So I think I'm just going to cut it out and get it gone. I mark where I want everything cutting with a Sharpie. Then I use a battery operated grinder with a 1mm cutting disc to cut through the unwanted metal. These discs make light work of thin body panels. Once removed, I dress the area with a file and then apply some rubber edging strip. This just avoids any sharp edges and it's much better. Right, so next job is this wing. This fits the same as the other side, but one thing I didn't mention before is you must fit the side repeater wiring through the inner wing before you bolt the wing up. You can't access this area afterwards, so don't forget. Right, this plug here is for the wideband oxygen sensor, and here's the loom for it. So I'm just going to, while the headlight's out, connect this up. Then I can feed this through the bulkhead. And I'm going to utilise the aerial loom grommet just to put the wire through because it's no longer used this. So the loom just runs up here, across here with the rest of the loom. It's going to go through this hole here. Beautiful. Right, next job's fit the headlight assembly. Now, unfortunately, you cannot retain this here. This is the adjuster because it just fouls the pipe. You can't do anything about it. What I tend to do is just cut it, fold the end over slightly so you can just put some pliers on it and still turn it. But yeah, it's just one of them things, unfortunately. So you know me now, guys. I can't put rusty screws like that back in. So I'm just going to give them a quick lick of paint, sand them down, make them look nice. Boom. The headlight just plugs in. Now, although every component has a separate plug, you can't get these wrong. Once wired up, the headlight should slot into the channel on the lower clips and bolt to the slam panel using 8mm headed Acme screws. Right, next up is the front bumper. So the bumper is just touching the intercooler here and here. So it just needs a little bit of a trim just to get it in. But we're nearly there. It's not bad, to be fair. I'm quite happy with that. I offer the bumper up and mark the areas that need cutting with a permanent marker. I use a grinder to cut plastic. I find it cuts through really easily. You could also use a jigsaw or even a sharp knife, but this is my preferred tool. I try and cut away small amounts at a time, then test fit, remark, cut again and repeat. This way you don't hack too much of the bumper off and you do get a better overall look. I then file off the edges. It's then just a case of bolting up the bumper. This is held on with 4 M8 bolts and 2 10mm Acme screws. I'm really happy with the final fit. Once the grill's all bolted up, you're never going to be able to tell. I then repeat the process with the grill. I use a flat disc and a deburring tool on the drill to carefully grind back the inner fins.
Right guys, so the grill and the bumper are being trimmed back so it now fits round the intercooler, and I've just made this little bracket up here. It's going to fit on top of here, rivet on, and this is going to support the grill because the tabs are broken off.
The brackets are made from aluminium sheet I'd laying around. I cut them to size and bent them in the vise. I attached them to the grill using 3.2mm rivets. These little touches remind me of a classic hand-built racing car, something you don't see so often these days.
Right guys, so I've attached the grill. I've made these nice fancy aluminium brackets which kind of follow the contours of the original plastic bracket. Obviously they were broken, so I've just made these. Grill's now attached really nicely. I'm really happy with that. It fits well. You can't really tell there's an intercooler there, so I'm happy. Now what I want to do, I want to fit a wide band gauge and a boost pressure gauge. Now I want to do this in a way that it can be reverted back to standard, but I also want it to look fairly original. So my plan is to mount them in here, use a little bit of steel. I'm going to wrap it in leather, some leatherette, and we're still going to have a little bit of a cubby hole here if I do it right. So let's start doing this. So I'm going to start by making a template out of cardboard.
I tend to use any old card I've laying around, and this bit is no exception. I roughly mark the edges with a pen, then trim to size, making sure it's slightly bigger than required. I can then refit and remark precisely. I then cut out a bit more and test fit again until I'm happy with the fit. It can be slow work, but taking your time gets the best results.
And there we go, something like that. So I've got the contours just about bang on here. This obviously needs making in metal, but yeah, the gauges are going to go there. You've still got a little cubby hole here, which is going to be handy. And I think it's going to look fairly factory, so I'm happy with that. Right, let's cut this out of metal.
I draw around the template with a fine permanent marker, then follow the top line with a 1mm cutting disc. I always use the Bosch stainless steel cutting disc. I find they last loads longer than a lot in the market. You need a steady hand for this, but practice makes perfect. Once cut, I finish the edges with a 60 grit flat disc. I mark the folded line and then transfer the piece to the vise so I can get a sharp folded edge. The piece fits perfectly.
Look at that, beautiful. Right, this hole saw is not doing a very good job. It's not really designed for this, it's designed for wood. I don't have the right one, so I'm chain drilling. Yay.
I wouldn't recommend chain drilling, it's slow and tedious, but as this is a one-off piece, it's not worth buying a proper hole saw. After a couple of minutes of drilling, I'm ready to knock out the centre. I then use a large step drill to finish the hole. Sadly, this was not suitable to drill the hole in the first place, as it just didn't do a good enough cut and was really struggling. I then clean it up with an 80 grit rotary wheel on a drill, and look at that, a perfect 52mm hole.
Right, as you can see, both holes are cut. Put a bit of grey paint on the bottom. It's a similar colour, but not exactly right, but near enough. I've also got a bit of a free sample grey vinyl, which I'm going to put on the top, just to kind of give it like an OE look. Again, this is a similar match to the interior, but not quite right. But yeah, should look pretty good, I think, once done.
I used off-the-shelf spray adhesive. I applied to both the vinyl and the steel, waited 5 minutes for it to go tacky, then I folded over the cut edge so you can't see the line, and stick the vinyl on. I then trim around the edge with scissors and a utility blade. The edges are then folded over and stuck firmly down. I cut the holes out with a Stanley knife.
And there we go, guys. I don't think it looks too bad. I do, however, I'm a little bit dirty. It's quite hot today, a little bit sweaty. But yeah, it's come out pretty good. Vinyl's not quite the right colour, like I said earlier. However, it was a free sample, so I can't complain. But I think overall, it's got a good look. And you've still got a little cubby hole, which is nice. Right, what I've done, I didn't want any holes in this, and I wanted it to be able to go back to standard. So I've taken this rear cap off here, and I've elongated this. So that's what it should be like, a smaller hole. I've cut it out with Stanley blade. I can still screw it in. Once the cover's on the top, you're never going to know. However, I'm not going to have the cover on for now. I'm just going to have the screw in because you can't see it anyway. And that means I can feed my pipes and my wires through this gap here, which should work very nicely. Right, now I'm just going to use a bit of double-sided tape just to stick this in. And that should do the job nicely. As you can see, all the wires are fed through. Lovely jubbly. Right guys, so before I can fit the centre console, I need to do some dash wiring. Now the owner has requested that I don't remove the dash purely for the fact that it's not in very good condition and don't want me to damage it. So that's your green wire for your rev counter, and that is your blue wire for your cooling gauge. We're not bothered about the management lights, we're going to leave that out. And we've literally just cut these out of the Calibra loom. I'm going to take these up. So this does actually plug in to the rev counter behind the dash, just on the spade connector. That's how they're done from the factory. So I should be able to put my hand up and connect it up. This one I'm not so sure about. It might be a little bit harder, but I could just splice into the loom lower down. But we'll see. Let's do this first. So I found a spare power feed behind the dashboard, and then this is a ignition feed. So it's only live when the ignition's on. And I've wired up both the boost gauge and the wideband sensor to it.
So guys, that is the dash back together with the exception of the under tray shelf. The rev counter and the coolant gauge are working because I've tested them, as is the voltmeter and all the other little bits and bobs. So yeah, happy with that. The air fuel ratio gauge appears to be working, although I haven't tested it properly, and the boost gauge also appears to be working, and the backlights are working for both of them. So that's really good. So all that's left to do now, pretty much on the inside, put the under tray back in and cable tie the ECU up, and just cable tie a bit of the wiring up, and then that is the inside done. So as you can see, I've got lots and lots of parts to fit. I've got new suspension arms, bushes, I've got new gas struts, got Wilwood brakes, lots and lots of things. So we're going to start, I think, with the struts. So this is what we've got. We've got brand new gas coilovers. Now I've been told these have been rated for the 2 litre 16 valve engine. We've also got these solid spherical strut tops. Now this combination should make a nice sporty ride, should be nice and solid, shouldn't allow for too much movement, but hopefully it will still drive pretty nicely as well. So I'm just going to explain what we've got basically. So we've got normal coilover, we've got a bump stop here, as you can see. Got the correct poundage spring apparently. Spring cup that fits on top of there, and then on top of that we've got a washer. And from what I can gather, it is then this, which is like the kind of a spacer what comes with this. Strut top and locking nut. Just like so. Now I don't have a 26mm socket, so I'm just using a spanner. Right, now we can fit it. Right. Straight away, they're a crap idea, the bolts will come with it. They're not really long enough. I think we're going to be better using studs and nuts, which is what it should have originally. Be easy to line up. Don't think they're long enough either. So I'm going to take it back out. Right, I've just put some bolts through from the other side. That should work nicely. So I'm going to slide it up. And as if by magic, I've already done this side.
Now this is typical YouTube. Everything looks like it's going swimmingly, but in reality, nothing was going well at all. The parts may look new and shiny, but this is far from the truth. Everything was a nightmare, and this was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Can you see why?
Right guys, so it's been a couple of days since I worked on this car, and the reason for that is I've been really busy, and I stopped working on the car the other day because it got to me, shall we say. Now, I'm normally pretty cool, calm and collective when it comes to working on motors. Don't normally bother me, I don't get upset about things too easily, you know, just have patience. However, this car is testing my patience. So, obviously, we're at the stage now, we're at the easy stage, so we're now fitting either brand new or refurbished parts. So everything should just bolt on, it should be really simple, no modifications required. However, that has not been the case. So what's happened? So basically, hubs, I've had somebody machine these, and basically these are Cavalier hubs machined so they're fitted to Nova bearings. And they've been machined a little bit too big. So what's happened is they've been pressed in and they've essentially imploded slightly, meaning the CV joint's really tight going in. When I say really tight, you basically need to press them on. So I've got this side in, but I'm not happy with it. I've kind of lost confidence in it. so we've had to buy some new ones. So we're waiting on brand new hubs to come. We've got some LMF ones, which I think are new old stock, so I don't think they sell them anymore. So that's one problem, hopefully solved once they come. Another major issue we've had is bottom arm. Right, so obviously slots in, bolts up through here. This is a reinforcement plate what's been welded on. However, whoever welded on has welded on in the wrong place. So basically, these holes aren't quite in the centre, meaning you can't get a socket on to tighten the bolts up. You can't get a spanner in anyway because of where the hub is, etc. So literally, I can't do anything about tightening these up. Very frustrating. Another problem I've got is this powder coat. So someone's refurbished these, and the powder coat literally just peels off. It's not adhered whatsoever. And I've had this with powder coat before, but not to this extent. It's really disappointing. So it's such a nice car. I mean, I can't leave it like that. It's such a shame. So that's another problem. Also, the powder coat is too thick. So this bush here should go on here. However, it doesn't fit because it's just too thick. So I'm having to grind all this off. Once you grind it, this wants to peel off because it's just not adhered. So when I was working on this the other day, I came across these problems. I also had an issue with the Willwood calipers. We can't get any brake hoses for it at the minute, so we're waiting for the brake hoses. The standard Nova hoses don't fit, which I didn't know about. So just little things like that. It was just very frustrating. I had 2 hours on the car, and I got probably 15-20 minutes worth of work done, because everything I've done I've had to take apart again, really. But what I will do for now, I spoke to the owner of the car, and all the powder coated bits I'm going to grind off. But I don't think it's going to take a lot, because look, it's just peeling off. But this is all going to get removed, and I'm going to paint these properly. They're obviously being blasted. The metal's really clean, so it'd be a shame not to use these. But I'm just going to paint them because the paint's going to stick. Yeah, it's not as hard wearing, but I mean, this is terrible. So I can't have it like that. It's too nice a car. So we'll do that. The bottom of this, I'm going to cut out so I can get access to the nuts. Nice and simple. On mine are only reinforced to there anyway. I can't see it making a major difference, if anything. So that'll be good enough for that. So I'm going to clean all these bits off. Clean all these bits off because, again, everything's the same. All peels off. Hope you can see that. Just absolute nightmare. And then once everything's painted, we can let them dry, and then hopefully a couple of days we can start rebuilding it once the parts have come. So let's make a start and stripping all these off.
So start by knocking out the poly bushes I've just fitted. Luckily these come out really easily, so it's not a problem. Then I scrape a lot of the powder coat off with a screwdriver. I cut the reinforcement plate out the way, and then clean all the rest of the powder coat with a flat disc, followed by some sandpaper, and an etch prime of everything, followed by some gloss black. Now this won't be as robust as powder coat, but it will definitely be better than what it had. And while they dry, we're going to start fitting a digi dash to this Mark 1.
So what's required to fit a digi dash into a Mark 1 Vauxhall Nova? Well, sadly, there's quite a lot. In a Mark 2, it's a lot easier because this surround here unbolts, and the speedo can sit behind it, and then the surround can go back on. In a Mark 1, the speedo tilts and locks in. So unfortunately, this speedo is actually slightly smaller than a GTE speedo, meaning it doesn't just slot in. So you've got to take the full dashboard out. So let's make a start. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the steering wheel. Now this is a factory 3-spoke. The horn just pulls off like so. Wires pull off the back. Then you have, I believe, a 22mm nut behind it, like so. And then I'm going to use a dedicated Vauxhall steering wheel puller. Now this is like 11 quid from Laser. Really handy, and it's so much easier to get these off than just trying to pull it. And if you do pull it, sometimes you can break them. So this is a preferred method for me.
So these tools essentially have two legs which are cam shaped on the end. So you put them through the hole in the back of the steering wheel, you turn them 90 degrees, and that just makes it lock onto the back of the steering wheel. And then you tighten up against the steering column, and that pulls the steering wheel off. Really simple, really effective.
And look at that, really easy. Right, next job is to take this cowling off, then start taking all the switch gear, etc. out. Phillips screwdriver. So we've got a Phillips screw in there, there, and there.
And then you've got 2 across here. Really easy. These switches just prise out, the light pulls out the back, and the plug unplugs. Really simple. So the ashtray just pulls out, you literally drop it down, pull it forward. So this is held on, there's a screw under here, Phillips, a screw under here of Phillips. And then this panel just pulls out. There's one screw around here, you can't quite see it, for this heater control panel. And that's it. Really simple. The wires simply pop out of that, again, really easy. And that is off. So to get the speedo out, you literally push the top corners and it pivots out. Once this panel's out, you can get to the back. You can put your finger on the speedo cable drive. There's a little sprung clip, push it at the bottom, and that will pull forward. And then it's just a case of unplugging the plug out the back, and that is the speedo out. This cowling is a bit awkward, but it will come. Just have to take your time. Push the dash in a bit. There we go. Out like so. There's 2 little pegs holding these in. And again, the plugs just pry off. They're the 2 little pegs. Hope you can see them. Push them in, they slide out. And you can fit TVR ones for these because that's the same as a TVR, believe it or not. Top tip from me. Other side's just the same. Fuse box cover just pulls off. And there's a couple of tabs at the bottom of the fuse box. And then it just pulls out. Headlight switch, just the same. Little tab on the bottom. 2 little fingers here, push them in, it pulls out. Bit of a mess behind here, if I'm honest. I need to tidy some of this up. For example, I don't like them chocolate blocks. Got a couple of screws on the side of the dash. On the early Mark 1, you just got one. Obviously, this is a later Mark 1, so they come out.
And this little area cost me 200 quid. Yes, the camera broke. Gutted. Never mind, onwards and upwards. Right, let's move back to the dash removal. There's a 10mm nut just here. Behind there, and there's also one behind the glove box. Unbolt them, and from memory, it should just pull out. So, glove box is held on with a few screws, Phillips screws. I think there's some underneath as well. Nice and easy. You don't have to take this out from memory, but I'm gonna, just to make it a bit easier to access that 10mm nut. And then that is that. And that is the dashboard out. Right, now that's out, I can start making the wiring look a bit neater. I can also start fitting the Astra GTE dash loom. Right, so Liam's just arrived to help out. I've tidied up the rest of the original Nova loom. I strapped up a lot of the C20 loom out the way, just to make it all fit nicely. The ECU does need mounting, but I'll do that once the dash is back in. I've retaped a lot of the loom with cloth tester tape. It looks loads better, and I've also trimmed back and prepped the dash room so I can start joining them up. Liam's fitted the speedo drive transducer and fed the loom through the original speedo grommet, so it looks really factory. These are 3 wires, a brown, which is an earth, a black, which is an ignition positive, and then the red blue, which is the sensor output wire that goes directly to the speedo. These just connect to the original Nova loom and the Astra GTE loom. You kind of tie them all in together. Right, let's start soldering everything together. So top tip from me is do not forget to slide the heat shrink on first. I've done this countless times and it's very frustrating because you have to redo your work. Another is to make sure the heat shrink is far enough down the wire so it doesn't actually shrink when you heat it up. I always strip the wires back around 10mm, then I twist them together, then solder both at the same time. I find it a really easy way of doing it and it's also really neat, and if done right, it shouldn't be any thicker, or barely any thicker than the original wire. The Astra loom and Nova loom literally join together, they're colour for colour, really straightforward. You will have a few wires left over, these aren't needed, but don't worry about them, just tape them up out the way. Take your time with it and try and make sure all the wires are the same length. This will really help when it comes to taping the loom up. Finally, once everything's soldered up, slide over the heat shrink and then use a heat gun or a blowtorch just to shrink the insulation down. It's now time to plug everything in and make sure it works. Boom! Looks like it does to me. Right, let's move on to the dashboard trimming. Right, so we've got the dash outside. It's a lovely evening. Speedo's here. What I've done, I've got a bit of cardboard and I've just taken a template of the profile of the Speedo. Right, the curve on the Astra Speedo is actually more curved, more severe, I suppose, than the Nova one. So I need to translate this to the dashboard because at the minute that isn't even close to fitting. As you can see, it's absolutely miles out there, and it's also catching a duct in. So yeah, we need to do lots of trimming. So my template is just going to go about here. I'm going to use the original top edge and then just trim the bottom edge to suit. I'm going to trim a little bit and then just go from there. I'm not really sure I'm going to cut it yet, but I'm going to mark it first, I think. That's the line I've marked. Hoping if I cut these bits out, the dash is going to fit in okay behind it. Let's give it a go. I used my trusty grinder with a 1mm cutting disc on the dash. I couldn't get into the corners, so I used a hot knife. I heated this up with a blowtorch first. It went through like a hot knife through butter. I took my time and did bit by bit until I was really happy with it. Once everything was cut out, I smoothed some of the reinforced areas with a flat disc on the back just to give me a bit more space. Right, so I've trimmed it all back now. These are the bits I've cut off. As you can see, it's quite a lot. I've gone around with a file and some 180 sandpaper, just clean the edge up, and some 320 sandpaper as well, just to finish it off. And I'm really happy with the cutout. I think it looks really nice, and it's going to fit really well, I think. And here's the back side. As you can see, I've had to cut all this right back. There was quite a thick edge here what had to be cut off. Massive amount had to be cut off here. Also, this duct in here was fouling the clock, so I've just heated it up with a blowtorch and pushed it in, hoping I could do that with the other piece. That means I don't have to cut anything. I've trimmed the lugs off the top of the dash as well. And there we go, guys. As you can see, it's really nicely. Edges look really good. I just need to hope it stays in that position when I bolt it all up. If not, I might have to make some kind of bracket. But yeah, I think that looks very factory, and I don't think you're going to really know if it's been modified. The dead sure for that. So I've just heated this bit of the top duct in, and I've stretched it with heat and a ball peen hammer like so. Just basically got it hot, pushed it in, got it hot, pushed it in. Just started to split here because it was getting a bit thin, so I've just put some foil ducting tape on it. And that just clears the dash well enough. There's the other end. Slots on like so. And it's just enough room for the Mark II Digi Dash. Right, so Digi Dash is fitted. I've neated the wiring up. I think we're now at the point where we can stick the dashboard in. Now it's getting late, you can probably tell it's getting dark outside. But I just want to shove the dash in and see if it fits. So let's do it. This was a fiddly job, but made much easier with an extra pair of hands. I will just say the Digi Dash is very tight across the back of the bulkhead, but it does go in. You just have to take your time. Right, guys, I'm knackered, so it's time for bed. Right, guys, I stayed up really late last night, but we got it done. I'm absolutely thrilled with the overall finish. I think it looks really good, and I think they should have come like this from factory. Now look at this dash. Tell me that is not stunning. We also fitted a nice Astra GTE 16 valve steering wheel, which just complements the whole thing and ties the whole thing in together. Yeah, to say I'm thrilled is an understatement. Right, we're nearly done, so back to the suspension. So start off by fitting the new poly bushes in the lower arms. So the bushes just slip in with some help from some lube. Then the stainless steel insert slides straight through the bush. Really easy. I repeat the process with the tie rod mounts. Now these were a little bit tight, so in the end I wound them in with impact gun. Now the bushes are done, we can bolt everything back together. The bottom arm's a little bit tight in the chassis. This isn't a bad thing really. So I use a mallet just to drive it home, and it makes light work of it. This is then secured with a fine threaded M10 bolt with 15mm hexes. The front tie rod bracket then gets bolted to the cross member. Again, it's secured with M10 bolts. Put the bolts in with an impact driver and finish off by hand just to ensure they're all really tight. The bottom arm sandwiches between the ball joint and the tie rod. These are held together with two M12 bolts. These are 90mm heads. So from experience, these can work loose really easily on a high powered neighbour. So I always FT them and make sure they're really, really tight. The second set of 2-litre modified hubs will arrive, so I waste no time fitting them. Ideally these should be fitted with a press, but I don't have one, so a hammer and a vise will do the job. First I press the bearing into the knuckle with a vise, ensuring I press on the outer edge of the bearing. I then fit the retaining clip on one side and drive the bearing in the rest of the way with bearing drift. The other circlip can then be fitted. I then sit the knuckle on top of the hub and drive it down with an inner bearing press, socket or hammer, whatever you want to call it. Ensure to press on the inner race just to avoid damaging the bearing. Knock it home, turn the knuckle constantly to ensure there's no tight spots, and once the tone and knocking it in changes, you know you've driven it all the way home. Well hey, one built up 2-litre conversion hub the redneck way. Right, now this is all pressed in, I can finally put this back together and get it rolling again. First off, CV joint in. As you can see, it went straight in. I then bolt up the coilovers and fit the track rod end. The CV joint is torqued up and the split pin is fitted to secure the castle nut. The track rod end is torqued up and the M8 ball joint pinch nut is then fitted and tightened. This disc just slots on. It's an uprated drilled and grooved Cavalier disc, 256 by 24mm. This is common on a lot of 2-litre Vauxhalls, some 1.8s, lots and lots of cars. The dreaded Wilbur calipers slot straight on, but need a 2mm spacer to fit properly. It's a little bit fiddly, but we get there in the end. They're secured with the original Nova caliper bolts, which is straightforward. The pads then slotted and held in place with a split pin, and the custom hoses routed correctly and then secured up. Woohoo! Right, front suspension is now finally built up. We're a little bit behind schedule, but these things happen. Wheel brakes are on, they just need bleeding. New discs are on, all the new arms, etc. So yeah, dead chuffed. Next job's to do the other side, which I'm not going to film for you guys. We've put some transmission fluid in, and then bleed the brakes. Right, Liam's here. He's built this side of suspension up off camera. So we are ready to put wheels back on, drop the car back on the floor, and that is this stage done. So I'm very pleased about that. And we have the next problem, the wheels don't fit. No. They're catching the caliper. We're having a lot of luck with this car. Right, this car is going to be the death of us. So, brake issues. These are obviously Wilwood 4-pot calipers. They're meant to be for a Vauxhall. They're very big because it's 4 pots. You've got pistons either side. Yep. The speed line. The speed line and Mistrals, I believe these are. These are 15-inch ET45. So, not perfect. It should be ET49, but pretty good Vauxhall fit, yeah? To put these on, you need a 5mm spacer to clear the brake caliper because it catches on here, yep. So, we decided, did a bit of research, and it looks like Speedline Alicios fit over these brakes. Now, these are an unusual Wilwood. Most Wilwoods don't look like this. But anyway, we did a bit of research and we thought Speedline's fitted. So, poor old Liam spent 900 quid on these and travelled 5 hours to get them. And they look fantastic, really nice, in good condition, nice tyres. However, these are even worse. We're literally talking half an inch gap to get them to fit because the inside edge is slightly bigger. The hub end's here, so if that was machined off, essentially, they'll fit, but it's not. We're not going to machine them off. So we've decided these Wilwoods have been nothing but issues since day one. We're going to get rid of them. I'm going to go back to the standard 2-litre brakes, 256 brakes. We're going to keep these discs and just put, you know, Cavalier 2-litre brakes on this. Get rid of them and then fit the speed lines because we're pretty sick of it. It's just like problem after problem. So
I'm going to whip these off now, ready for some 2-litre Cavalier brake. It does mean it now rolls and then we can push it out the garage, and doesn't it sound good?
Give it a rev. Nice. So these are the brakes I'm going to be using. Now, these are standard ATE brakes as fitted to 2-litre Cavaliers, some Vectra Bs, Astra Mark 3s, Mark 2s, quite a few things. They are more than good enough for this kind of car. It's very lightweight after all. So they're very dirty, very rusty. We need to make them look a bit better. Excuse the sweat again. It's a very hot day. Now these are a set that I've already started to clean up. So this is the other side to that one basically. Now these were just as rusty when I got them. What I've done is I've stripped them all down. I've taken the pistons out. I've wire wheeled them. I've cleaned them all up with sandpaper, and then I've X-primed them. So these are now ready to be painted red. So let's make that side look like that side. Right, so first off, I popped the piston out. I did this using compressed air. So I literally took the banjo out, put a little bit of air in, put a rag in here, and you'll just a little bit at a time, and you'll just see it slowly come out. When it gets to about here, don't put as much pressure on because it's going to pop all of a sudden, and don't get your fingers trapped because it might hurt. So that's the piston. There's an O-ring in there, which we'll take out with a screwdriver in a minute. And then there's a dust seal like this, which goes around the outside of the piston, just to stop debris. Now with these, I always clean them up with some fine sandpaper. Same within here, just clean it up a little bit. And then clean the seal with some brake cleaner. And then I put it all back together with some brake fluid just to lubricate it all. Put it back together. You can buy new seals, but generally I find they're okay. Again, like this, there's no splits in it or anything. So yeah, I'll just clean it, put it back together. So next job's the retaining spring. Now this will just prise out or wiggle out. It's kind of been painted over, so like so. That basically is just like an anti-rattle, just holds it all together. Now we're going to take these bits out here. Now the sliders go through here, and if there's a bit of rust underneath here, it makes the sliders tight. And 9 times out of 10 there's rust under here. So if you pop these out with a little screwdriver, clean the inside with a wire wheel, put it back together with some silicone grease, that's going to slide lovely, and it's going to be like a brand new caliper. There you go. As you can see, it's pretty rusty in there. So like I say, once that's cleaned up, that's going to be a lot better. Right, so next job, this bleed nipple. Now these can get really tight and they can snap off really easy. The top tip from me is to give it a couple of good smacks with a hammer first. That just helps release it. 9mm socket, and there we go. The amount of people that break these because they don't do that is unreal. Again, we're going to clean that up. Right, last job is just to take this seal out. So it's a square O-ring and it comes out very, very easily, like so. Right, that's the O-ring. Again, when we clean it, we're going to use a bit of rag, bit of brake cleaner, a bit of brake fluid. If you use anything oil-based, it could make the seal expand, meaning it's not going to work anymore. Obviously, these are designed to run in brake fluid, so that's fine. Right, one rusty caliper. Right, next up's the slider. So the pads slot in here and they can slide up and down. And then the caliper slides on these bits here. These are the sliding pins and the rubber bit goes around here. So as you can imagine, if there's rust behind them, they're going to get tight and it's not going to work properly. Again, give these a tap. And it's a 7mm Allen key, which is a bit of an unusual size. And they should just come out. Now, ATE brakes are standard on a lot of German stuff. Volkswagen, Audi group cars. I think Mercs have them, lower level Mercs. Obviously a lot of Vauxhalls, Opels, Saabs, them kind of things. So they're pretty easy to get parts for. There we go, there's the sliding pins out. Right, next job is to start cleaning this up. So I'm going to use a wire wheel on a grinder. These wire wheels are really good, but they're also really dangerous. So for God's sake, wear eye protection, cover your face, wear gloves, and take your time. Once I've gone over the whole thing with the wire wheel, I then move on to a drill with a smaller wire wheel just to do the smaller areas, the more intricate areas which you can't really get to with the grinder. And then I just kind of go over with a flat disc just to smooth some of the rough areas off, some of the casting marks, etc, etc. And then they're ready. Right, so there we go, all clean back, looking lovely again. So I'm going to give it some X primer, just standard Q-pole stuff, and then she can have some 2K top coat. Right, now that's done, it's time for some top coat, which I'm going to use some direct gloss red 2K paint, which works really well and should last really well. So it's been 24 hours since I painted these calipers. I've quickly just built them back up. So I put the seals back in with some grease, silicone grease, remember. Put these back in the sliders, just clean everything back up, put it back together, nice and easy. Now we can reassemble the brakes. So the discs are already on, as you can see. First job's to put a hanger on, Now I have cleaned up the areas where the pads sit, just to make things fit a little bit better. Now these are 12mm bolts holding the hanger on. They've got a 10mm Allen key head, and I just do them up as tight as I can with a 1/2 inch ratchet. Nice and simple. Right, now it's time to stick the pads in. Nicely does it. Slider pins, I'm just going to use a little bit of silicone lube on these. They slide in like so. And fasten with a 7mm Allen key. And finally, the anti-rattle clip, spring clip, whatever you want to call it. Beautiful. Right, now the caliper's on, we can fit the brake hose. So this literally just goes on like so, copper washer either side of the hose. The hose should point upwards. There's a little square bracket here just to align it to, so it's pretty straightforward. You can't really get it wrong. It's done up with an 11mm spanner or socket. And then it's just a case of pushing the hose through this little bracket here. Again, it should only be able to go in one place. And slide in the new clip in. And then fit the brake pipe in the hose. So the other side caliper is now on, all tight. Now we're bleeding the brakes. So literally I've got a bleed bottle, pressurise the system at the top with a pressure bleeder. All we're doing is opening the nipple, letting some fluid come out, and as you can see that's some air in there. So we just want to do it until the air stops. There's a big bit of air there. It's all running out. Lock it off. And repeat the process on the other side. Really simple. So rear brakes are exactly the same process. I've got the pipe on, bit of pressure in the system. Now I'm just going to undo it. As you can see, there's a bit of air in it. Now this one's the furthest away from the cylinder, so I'm just going to run it through for a little bit, just to get the crap out of the old fluid. So we've also got a set of wheel spacers for the back because the speed lines are catching the coilovers. So these are 5mm thick. They fit properly, the proper Vauxhall ones. And we've got 5mm longer bolts, so we can do a proper job. Right, happy with that, so I'll lock that off now. I did just clean the face of this hub up before I put the spacer on. Now let's put the wheel back on. Right, back on the floor, torque the wheels up. Right, again, I'm a sweaty mess, but let's road test it. Right, so it's been a few days, guys. We're on a test drive of the Nova. Now, this isn't the first test drive. I'd be lying if I said it was. I put it back together. We've had a few boost issues, which I've tried to resolve. I've basically put it down to I think the turbo is not very good. I think it needs a new turbo. So we've got a turbo on order. If you want to know how I diagnose that, if you want to know any more information on the turbo, drop me a comment below. If I get enough comments, I might do a separate video. But anyway, it's on the road. It's road legal. But like I say, it isn't boosting properly. There's definitely issues, which is very annoying. But it does drive okay. There is a slight intermittent misfire. It doesn't always happen. If I'm honest, it's worse today than ever before. So don't know what that is. Yeah, the turbo was only really boosted to 5 or 6 psi. What I found basically is the turbo is kind of like, I don't really know what's happened, but the compressor side of the turbo is actually starting to wobble around. It's loose, so I'd imagine it's probably done some harm inside the turbo. It was a freshly built turbo by somebody. We bought it like that, but yeah, I'm not really sure what's gone on. Definitely an issue, unfortunately. But yeah, we're gonna look and get a KRS turbo, which are very, very well known in the Cavalier turbo world, C20 LET turbo world. So yeah, we're gonna get one of them. They're tried and tested. I think they're a bit better than standard anyway. But yeah, it's a little bit disappointing. I wanted it to be right the first time. Tried to build it so it'd be right the first time, and it isn't. It's one of them things. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. This is what happens when you're using like 30-year-old parts. It can't always be perfect. But anyway, I'll quickly show you what it goes like. Second gear. It's not bad, it's pretty lively, it's not quite as fast as mine, which was boosting to nearly 10 psi then, but it's just intermittent, it's not always doing it, it's not right. Another issue we've definitely got is the wideband doesn't seem to be working. So I'm just going to do third gear power run. So third gear.
So as you can see, the gauge is just not reading, it's all over the place. So we've got a new sensor on order, as well as the new KRS turbo.
So we have this beauty. So what we have basically is a reconditioned KRS Stage 1 turbo. Now this has a billet compressor wheel from memory. It also has an uprated actuator and heat shield. Has much better bearings and seals inside. It's got a stainless steel penny valve and it's balanced to motorsport spec. So this should be super reliable and should offer a really nice, safe 300 horsepower, which is much better than the crap we've got on it at the minute. Right, so fit turbo, we've got to take front bumper back off, unfortunately, rad, intercooler, all that crap. We've already started, as you can see. So I think we're just going to time lapse this and get it done. We start by jacking up the car and placing it on axle stands. I tend to put the stands under the front tie rod mount as I find them really secure there. I then unbolt the downpipe while Liam removes the bumper. The slam panel brace is then removed along with the intercooler. I drain the rad out and of course most of it ends out on the floor, not in the bucket, and then pull the rad out completely. The oil lines are then removed along with the vacuum lines and the lambda sensor. Liam unbolts the manifold and off it comes. A lot easier than the 2 litre TDI Charan I recently did. We then quickly swap over the coolant lines, etc. to the new unit. Right, so that's all the ancillaries and bits and bobs swapped over from the old turbo to the new turbo. And that was the issue with the old turbo. As you can see, that's loose. Taking this off, and then bolts there were not tight enough. So it's made the whole thing just kind of collapse and shit itself, basically. Not good. Right, I'm going to fit it now, and hopefully we're going to be boosting properly by the end of the video. We fit it all in reverse order. We start by bolting the manifold to the head, then we bolt the downpipe and connect the oil return. The vacuum lines then slide onto the compressor housing and the actuator. We then fit the rad and intercooler off camera just to speed up the repair. So it's 6 o'clock, we've been on it 3 hours, just putting the bumper back on. It runs, turbo's obviously all on, coolant's filled up, everything seems okay. We've also put a new wideband sensor in because the one we bought second hand clearly wasn't working, and that seems to be reading spot on now. So yeah, once Liam's put the bumper back on, we're going to give it a razz down the road, and fingers crossed that's going to fix our issue. The bumper's held on with 4 M8 bolts into the chassis leg, and that's about it. The modified grille is then secured using 3 self-tappers. That's it guys, the engine room conversion is now finished. Doesn't it look absolutely fantastic? I'm really pleased with it. I'm that pleased I've even put my name on it. Right guys, so it's the first proper drive. Air fuel seems pretty good, doesn't it?
Yep.
Right. I'm happy with that. Now it's a third gear. It's all good, huh? Yeah, I'm happy with that. Are you happy, mate?
I'm happy now.
Oh, I'm pleased.
Sorry, language. Love it going.
Right, Liam's first drive. In case you're wondering, the red pipe through the window is for the bleed valve. Now this is just a dial in the turbo, and it's obviously only a temporary thing.
There's lots of bends around here. You just be careful. Don't kill me. Whoa! Scary, isn't it?
There's no pace coming in fast.
Is it a bit quicker than a 1.6 GTE, mate?
It's a bit quicker.
Hell. Sorry for swearing, YouTube.
We're on a private road, by the way.
Show everybody a smile.
Right, now back to me. And as you can see, the bleeder valve's now sorted and the pipe work is all nipped and done.
So you're happy, Liam?
I'm happy.
Very happy.
Very happy.
Good. I'm pleased to hear it.
Seems like the longest 6 months of my life. But
Yeah, it's been a while, but we got there in the end. Hard work pays off.
hard work, dedication, and crap parts.
What does Matt Armstrong say? Hard work beats talent.
Hard work beat talent.
Yeah, well,
extra fuel.
Think bit about it.
BT.
So yeah, I think we should wrap the video up there, guys. Liam can take his car home now. He's a happy bunny. He's got a bit of summer left. He can be boosting about, and I can move on to the next project. So hit the subscribe button, guys. Stay tuned for more, and next week you'll be seeing my new Audi. See you later. Bye.
Drop the clutch.